Well, Nigerian government has been fighting that over time, and we have seen significant improvement since the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It's not yet completely solved, but I think we have seen, remarkable improvement in the way our oil theft is being copped, especially in the Niger Delta region. I think the coming on board of these private refineries is also helping to ensure that this happens. I think the theft has been significantly reduced. It is still there, but we'll work even further to ensure that Nigeria's oil is not taken away by any criminal to be sold somewhere.
Nigerians often talk about the issue of brain drain, especially in sectors like IT, health, nurses and doctors, and tech. What is it that the Nigerian government, of which you're part of, can do to make sure that less people find it worth staying home for and do instead of going further ashore to look for greener pastures?
I think it's already happening. The reform agenda of Mr. President is copying this issue of brain drain. The medical industrialization pursued by the health sector, for example. In the past, all the pharmaceutical companies just import their products into Nigeria, but now we have a stronger policy that will compel them to also set up these manufacturing plants in Nigeria so that they can create jobs for our people, provide more opportunities for our young men and women to participate in that sector. And then I think once industrialization take hold, it will be necessary that we have people staying more at home than going out of the country. Already government is working on electricity, which is a major component of industrialization. Only recently the president has muled the idea of setting up a company to work in the electricity sector to ensure that we have a better electricity for our people, because this is absolutely necessary for you to industrialize. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, having fixed the economy, in the way and manner he has done, having also working hard to ensure that there's security for everyone. The next phase is industrialization, and this is where we are going. This certainly will help to curb brain drain and attract more people to come to Nigeria. And indeed, you see young Nigerian people working in the fintech and making waves around the world, here in the UK as well. So I believe that with industrialization, with emphasis being put in setting up more factories in Nigeria, more Nigerian young men and women will be there, and those who have traveled outside this country may find it necessary to come back. We're already seeing that in the health sector.
You paint a wonderful picture of what you're doing, what you're wanting to achieve, and I hope that Nigerians, be young and old, looking and hearing you, will think, well, we have gotten somewhere. Would that be your assessment, that they will be thinking, this government has done better than the others that have come before you?
Obviously so. I think that they know that already, and there is this expectation that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to do even a lot more to make Nigerians better. Prosperity is what the president has promised Nigerians when he took office, and I think Nigeria is on a march towards that prosperity that that the president promised. We're on our way there, and we'll get there.
And you're sure that he can win another term if and when those promises are fulfilled, that the Nigerians will give him yet again the trust to lead them?
Well, if you have a good football team that is winning, I mean, nobody will want to change them.
Which you don't, because you're not going to the World Cup.
Yeah.
Sorry to bring that up.
Yeah, but we believe that we have a team that is working hard. We have a government that is delivering on its promises to its people. We're absolutely confident that Nigerians will renew President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's mandate because he's done so much in about 3 years, less than 3 years now. He's going to do even more when his time is renewed. We are very hopeful.
Thank you for listening to the interview.
You'll find more in-depth conversations on the interview wherever you get your BBC podcasts, including episodes with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, plus many more. Until next time, bye for now.
From the BBC, that was the interview.
Good morning, Manitoba. Hello, Winnipeg. I'm Julie Buckingham, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. You are with Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and of course on the app and on YouTube. It's Tuesday morning, spring break. Current temperature outside our downtown studios, -5 degrees. A bit of a sketchier drive this morning as we've had that light snowfall overnight, and so you're going to definitely notice the wet roads in amongst the potholes as well. So that is something to keep in mind, particularly if you're going to be doing some highway commuting. Let's go around the room, as they say, and say hello to our team this morning. Abby Adeyemi is our senior tech, pushing all the right buttons and covering the weather. Darren Morash, our YouTube producer this morning. May McKillop, the show director, and she is also going to make sure that you're getting to and from in a safe fashion today, watching the commute. Of course, our morning show is on until 8:37. And let's get things kicked off, heading to our news center for your headlines. Good morning, Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Premier Wap Kinew says the NDP's gas tax holiday in 2024 was the most important thing a Manitoba government has ever done. Kinew making that comment Sunday during the federal NDP convention. The Premier's office says he was serious. The PC opposition calls him out of touch, and one political scientist says the Premier likely got caught up in the moment. We're going to hear more about that coming up. As well, Manitoba's health minister has no plans to make measles vaccines mandatory. But starting today, Uzoma Asaguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. We'll hear more details in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Still to come on the show after the World Report, we'll hear from a Manitoba Anishinaabe artist whose work is heading to the moon. Literally, NASA's upcoming space mission. And of course, we'll talk more about that space mission as we talk to an astrophysicist and also a local University of Manitoba professor. Manitoba Hydro's hybrid employees are moving from 3 days in the office to 4, and many are certainly not happy about that switch. More after World Report.
On cue.
I'm Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. Canadian electronic quartet Holy F has spent 2 decades making music out of just about anything. They're celebrating 20 years together and back with a new album, Event Beat. And they'll be here to talk about their unorthodox sound and the journey behind it.
I firmly believe that technology is something to be reckoned with.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Angie Seth. The federal government is accused of giving in to pressure from the airline industry. Critics say backroom pressure is leading the Canadian Transportation Agency to move away from the fee, forcing airlines to pay for passenger complaints. Internal documents obtained by CBC's Go Public team reveal intense lobbying to reduce and delay that fee. Erica Johnson has more.
3 years ago, Parliament ordered the Canadian Transportation Agency to implement a fee for airlines to help cover the cost of passenger complaints for things like denied boarding, cancelled flights. Government records Go Public obtained under the Access to Information Act show Transport Canada and then Minister of Transportation Anita Anand encouraging the CTA to back down from its proposed $790 fee. In an email from WestJet, the airline urges Minister Anand to indicate her disapproval of the fee. Days later, she writes the CTA, echoing WestJet's concerns, even using similar language. Gabor Lukács heads up the advocacy group Air Passenger Rights.
The minister is acting as the mouthpiece for the industry.
Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch says he's not surprised by the lobbying.
The system is all rigged in favor of protecting big business interests.
The CTA then said it was considering lowering the fee to $450. Not low enough, said Anand, who pushed for a maximum of $250 for larger carriers. Minister Anand did not reply to questions. Transport Canada said it didn't intend to fetter the CTA's independence. WestJet said its goal was improving affordability for Canadians. In 2023, Ottawa earmarked almost $76 million in taxpayer dollars for the CTA to clear the backlog, now almost 100,000 complaints. That funding expires today. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Explosions ring out over Isfahan, Iran's third largest city. It's been repeatedly targeted by Israeli and U.S. strikes. Iran also launched a new wave of attacks overnight, targeting several cities, including Tel Aviv. In the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia all reporting drone attacks. And authorities in Dubai say a Kuwaiti crude oil tanker was hit off its shores by an Iranian drone. Megan Williams has the latest.
Just after midnight here in Dubai, a Kuwaiti oil tanker fully loaded with crude, anchored just off the city's port, was hit by what Kuwait Petroleum is calling a direct Iranian drone strike. The Al Salmi was bound for China, carrying oil from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Authorities say there's damage to the hull, but all 24 crew are safe. And so far, no oil has spilled. It's been far from quiet here. 6 loud booms resonated in pairs this morning, minutes apart, sounding as if they were moving closer to the city center. Authorities confirmed those sounds were interceptions of incoming missiles and drones. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait also reported interceptions overnight, with some damage in Saudi Arabia. As Washington tries to navigate a way out, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Al Jazeera deciphering Iran is difficult, with its new supreme leader Ayatollah Mashtaba Khamenei in hiding.
No one has seen him, no one has heard from him. It's very opaque right now.
Still, Rubio confirmed there are talks underway with Iran through intermediaries, even if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. A significant shift. 2 Chinese container ships successfully sailed through the strait on a second attempt, a rare sign of movement in waters largely paralyzed for weeks. Oil prices remain above $115 a barrel. Megan Williams, CBC News, Dubai.
Meantime, Israeli military officials say 4 soldiers have been killed in southern Lebanon. 2 others are injured. The IDF says they died in a clash with Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Israel says it's investigating the deaths of 3 UN peacekeepers. They were with the UN interim force in Lebanon. They died Monday in 2 separate incidents. Israel says because they died in an active combat area, it should not be assumed they were killed by IDF fire. Australia is threatening to sue some social media giants. It says they're not doing enough to keep kids away from their platforms. The country banned children under 16 from holding some social media accounts. The first report from its internet regulator shows alleged non-compliance from Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube. Annika Wells is Australia's communication minister.
Social media platforms are choosing to do the absolute bare minimum because they want these laws to fail. They want as many customers on their platform as possible. That maximises their profit. This is the world-leading law. We're the first in the world to do it. Of course they don't want these laws to work because they want that to be a chilling effect on the dozen countries that have come out since December to follow Australia's stead.
France is planning a similar social media ban, and the UK and Canada are considering the same. Parent companies Meta and Snap say they're committed to complying with the ban. The internet regulator says it's gathering more information before recommending legal action. Well, a group of researchers at Dalhousie University is sounding the alarm. They say the Halifax Regional Municipality is not factoring in the possibility of a mass evacuation in its city's planning. As the CBC's Ben Dornan reports, it's causing major concerns given the city's growth over the past decade.
I haven't seen much bold or actionable items yet.
Hassan Habib is a professor and transportation expert at Dalhousie University. He says on an average workday, commuters flood into the Halifax Peninsula, pushing the population to roughly 100,000 people. That's a massive concentration for a municipality of over 500,000 residents. He warns that it adds a greater risk in the event of a disaster.
We have seen that, of course, like with the time and with the different kinds of travel activity, the evacuation time has increased to 23 hours.
Almost an entire day for everyone to get out safely. He says one of the major factors is that the peninsula only has 5 exits. In 2017, his estimate was 15 hours. Habib says a decade of growth without much consideration by the city of a potential mass evacuation is to blame. He says hurricanes, floods, and wildfires are among the biggest threats in the area. Halifax Regional Council voted unanimously in 2024 to update the municipality's evacuation plan. Imad Aziz is the municipality's director of emergency management.
It's a multi-year plan, but the strat plan itself will be presented in its final form later in the year.
Professor Habib is happy about the work that's happening, but says there's much more to be done before he'll be confident that everyone will get out safely if disaster strikes. Ben Dornan, CBC News, Halifax.
Jewelry giant Pandora says it's coming to Canada. The Danish company says it is opening a distribution centre in Ontario to help reduce its exposure to U.S. tariffs. The jewelry maker, known for its charm bracelets, makes its products at 2 factories in Thailand, but they've been hit hard by U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on that country. So the new warehouse will be in Mississauga. Jewelry ordered in Canada will no longer have to pass through U.S. customs. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne heads to China today to forge new investment partnerships. He's following up Prime Minister Mark Carney's January visit. Among the deals, Canada's plan to import thousands of Chinese electric vehicles. China is a world leader in EV manufacturing. The CBC's Lisa Xing is in Shanghai with this look at what's driving that success.
Hundreds of robots weld together different models of custom-ordered EVs on the factory floor of Zeekr, a Chinese luxury electric vehicle brand. Known as a dark factory because the level of automation is so high, the machines can largely work without lights. Automated manufacturing has helped reduce costs significantly, but also ensures quality, says the plant's general manager, Xu Naiping. China is leading the globe in EV manufacturing. It makes more than 70% of the world's electric cars, a result of a heavy push in research bolstered by sizable government subsidies. In downtown Shanghai, Cao Xingyue drives into a parking lot and backs into what looks like a car wash. The floor opens up, and robots swap out his depleted battery for a new one. In 3 minutes, he's on his way to work.
It's better than charging my battery because it saves more time for me.
There are more than 3,000 of these battery swapping stations across China, an emerging competitor to the traditional charging market. Wang Kunpeng is vice president of China's biggest charging company, Teld.
For
EVs to develop, there must be charging infrastructure first, he says. This kind of mindset would be welcomed by some Canadians now that Canada is letting in 49,000 Chinese EVs. Lisa Xing, CBC News, Shanghai.
And that's the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Angie Seth. This is CBC News.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Buckingham, sitting in today for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere you are on the app, and of course, on YouTube. It is the Tuesday morning of spring break, so maybe you're moving a little bit slower than usual. Glad you're here. The temperature outside our downtown Studio 15, sitting at -4 degrees. We've had some snow overnight, so that could impact your drive if you are doing some commuting, particularly inside the city or out on the highways. Abby has your full forecast in just a few moments. This hour on the show, we will hear from a Manitoba Anishinaabe artist whose work is, well, headed to the moon. And Manitoba Hydro's hybrid employees moving from 3 days in the office to 4, and many not necessarily too happy about the change. Now let's head over and pop into the news center with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba is stepping up its fight against the measles as cases soar to almost 400 since the start of this year. Starting today, Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. They say public health officials are also getting more aggressive in efforts to reach people about vaccines. So we'll hear about that coming up. And Manitoba's chief public health officer says he is paying close attention to a meningitis outbreak in the UK. It's left 2 people there dead. Dr. Brent Rusin says spike in cases in the UK is a reminder of the seriousness of this disease. We'll hear from him in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
Thank you.
Abby Adiemi has been busy checking over the forecast. Now, maybe not as active in terms of weather as it was yesterday, but definitely had some snowfall overnight.
Yeah, good morning, Julie. You step outside this morning, you will notice we are covered, snow-covered streets, snow-covered sidewalks, snow-covered bike paths, even trails, snow-covered this morning, and not leaving out the highways. The highways might be tricky if you're on the number 1, the number 75, and even the 53 this morning and around the Dickens Corner. So pay attention as you approach those areas as this late season system tapers off. While flurries will end sometime this afternoon in the southern region, the entire province still remains under that below seasonal temperatures. This time of the year, Winnipeg is supposed to be around +4, but that's a high. But today we only get to -2. So we're still really way off seasonal for this time of the year. For the city, we're looking at temperatures. We're seeing this snow ending sometime this afternoon. You might see it on and off if you step out this morning. That should taper off, and then we'll see some mainly cloudy conditions. You will notice the breezy conditions coming from the northwest during the day. Current temperatures around -6 at the Forks. We're tracking the similar conditions at the airport at this time. Light snowfall in there. Temperature's going to be hovering around this -6 for most of the day, with the winds coming from the northeast as mentioned. And similar conditions we're seeing across the southern regions, -2 to -6. Temperatures will try to get close to -8 for some regions, but Winnipeg, we're aiming for a high of -2 today. Up north, we're still seeing frigid conditions. Temperatures hovering between -13 and -27, with wind chills between -31 and -38 as you travel towards Churchill this morning. So in summary, snow-covered streets, roads, sidewalks, trails, it's covered for now. But take it easy, and we should see some melting soon.
Okay, thanks, Abby.
I'll go get the call.
Okay, that'd be great. May McKillop is our show director and is also monitoring traffic as well. It sounds like we're getting a call on the commuter line.
The commuter line this early. I love to hear it. I'm hoping everything's okay out there, but for now, I'm really keeping an eye on those highways today, particularly south on 75 towards Emerson. East of Winnipeg on Highway number 1 towards Falcon Lake. We're seeing some partly snow-covered conditions. I'm really keeping an eye on southwestern Manitoba highways, though. So west on Highway number 1 out of Winnipeg, we're seeing some partly snow-covered conditions, as well as some partly ice-covered conditions through Carberry. And north of Highway number 1, of course, where we got that dump of snow last night. On Highway 16 through Neepawa and Highway number 10 through Riding Mountain National Park. We're seeing some snow-covered conditions and some blowing and drifting snow. Do you have a traffic note, Julie? I see you there.
Yeah, Trucker George called us saying very icy from Starbuck to Oak Bluff.
Okay.
So take it easy if that is part of your commute. So thanks to Trucker George for what you do and for also giving us a call this morning.
Today's the day where we're really going to be counting on those people calling the commuter line. That number to call is 204-788-3093.
15 minutes after 6 o'clock, Information Radio. I'm Julie Buckingham in for Marcy Marcusa today. And it is an exciting time for people who love all things space. And in particular, a group of Manitobans will really be watching this for an extra reason. Astronaut Jeremy Hansen is headed to the moon on that historic Artemis 2 mission. But it's what he's wearing that is also getting attention back here on Earth. At a news conference recently, Hansen gave a shout out to the Indigenous patch on his space suit. That artwork is rooted in Anishinaabe teachings and was created by Manitoba artist Henry Guimond. CBC's Karen Pauls spoke to him about that achievement.
When I first found out, it was shocking. Like when Jeremy first approached me, he gave me a phone call and he said he wanted a painting. I thought it was just an average painting, and all of a sudden he said it was a mission patch. I never ever did anything right in my life, but it came true.
How does it feel to know that it'll be up in space in a couple of days?
Amazing. It's a long way for my artwork to be going. Truly amazing.
Well, and they're going to go further in space than any human has ever gone before. What do you think is the significance of your art and those sacred teachings being on a mission like this?
It's great for Indigenous knowledge to be recognized in that way, to be able to put it all together. The collaboration we did work together, me and Jeremy, brought it all to life. Totally amazing.
How important do you think it is to take Indigenous teachings on an exploration mission like this?
It's good for everyone. You took learn those teachings, the 7 laws for all humanity, not just for Indigenous people, but for all people.
What's the most important thing in that artwork that you want to tell people about? What does it mean?
Well, it's about sharing the teachings and knowing the spirit of the mission. And we are able to put it together to recognize the Indigenous knowledge and to share it with the world.
What's it like for you in Sagin First Nation, Manitoba, to know that your artwork is going up into space?
That was out of this world feeling for that to happen. Because I did a lot of artwork for the Turtle Lodge. That's where I was based out of. And that's how Jeremy recognized the work. And that's how he contacted me.
So are you going to watch it? Watch the launch when it happens?
Yes, me and my family are going to watch, yeah.
What do you think that's going to be like?
Yeah, awesome. God for Jeremy also to carry that patch with him.
Well, congratulations. That's a pretty cool accomplishment. And it's almost like you're going with him, hey?
Yeah, a piece of me is going with him. Like the mission patch gave me my own little mission too, where I got to travel to go to Montreal, went to the space agency, went to Regina to the unveiling of the patch. It was amazing.
Amazing, out of this world story, quite literally. Manitoba Anishinaabe artist Henry Guimond speaking with the CBC's Karen Pauls. And on Radio Noon later today, they will speak to astronaut Jeremy Hansen himself. You will not want to miss that conversation.
Local news is in decline across Canada, and this is bad news for all of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
In the fall of 2023, Romana Didalo, a woman calling herself the Queen of Canada, drove into Richmond, Saskatchewan with a fleet of RVs and set up her kingdom in an abandoned school. So the town banded together to get the cult out by any means necessary. My name is Rachel Brown, and in this season of Uncover, I explore what happens when a conspiracy theory lands in your backyard. The Cult Queen of Canada. Available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
It is 20 minutes after 6 o'clock. Julie Buckingham in for Marcy Marcusa. We will hear from Marcy later on today as she tees up the shows that are going to be happening Wednesday and Thursday from Brandon. So looking forward to chatting with Marcy out in the Wheat City. Well, as we heard from Henry Guimond, his patch will soon be on board and with Jeremy Hansen and the rest of the team on Artemis 2. So we'll be watching for that extra special artwork designed right right here in Manitoba to be heading to the moon. And NASA's Artemis 2 mission is undergoing final preparations before launch. Weather permitting, the 4 astronauts could blast off from Florida's Kennedy Space Center as soon as tomorrow. They'll lift off on a 10-day journey around the moon, taking them deeper into space and further from Earth than anyone in history. For more on the story, we have reached Jesse Rogerson, an astrophysicist and associate professor at York University in Bradford, Ontario. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Why is NASA finally sending these 4 astronauts back to fly around the moon?
Oh gosh, why go back to the moon now? Well, if you look at what space exploration since it started in like the early 60s with humans, originally way back 50 years ago, the reason to go to the moon was political. It was geopolitical. It was Cold War pressure. So they were, the United States and the Soviets were sort of battling this out in space. Who was going to be first? Who was going to get to orbit? Who was going to dock? Who was going to go to the moon, etc. And the United States ultimately won that race. We all know the history there. But it was a little bit of running before walking. Getting to the moon is difficult. And we weren't really good at flying into space. We were sort of patching this together. We had massive budget, or at least the Americans had massive budgets to make it happen. It wasn't the good reason to go, which was for the science and for the presence and for the engineering. So after this was all over, we came back to Earth, and United States and Canada and Europe started banding together and thinking about what to do next. And we ended up building a space station with a lot of partners. We tested out international relationships, and we got really, really good at going to space. We spent the last 25 years perfecting space exploration in low Earth orbit. So now we're good at it. We're so good at it that now the technology is so proliferated that space industry, the private industry, has started putting things in space. So things have totally changed over the last 50 years. And now we are ready. Technology has caught up, relationships have caught up, and humanity is ready to do those bigger steps to the moon. And this has come to fruition as the Artemis program. And now this is the Artemis 2 mission, the first one with humans on board. So that's the whole history and why we go.
And it promises to be a historic mission and also make Canadian history as well. So how so?
So that's, as you just pointed out a few minutes ago, on board this mission, there's 4 astronauts on board, 3 Americans, but 1 Canadian. The first non-American to fly to the moon, Jeremy Hansen. He's from London, Ontario. He was a 2009 Canadian Space Agency hire, so he's been an astronaut since 2009. He hasn't flown to space yet. This is his first mission. And if you think about all the people who have been to the moon, 24 individuals, they were all Americans, they were all white Americans, and they were all male. So this crew of 4 has 3 males, 1 person of color, a female, and a non-American, a Canadian. So this is historic for Canada. And I think what it does is it speaks to the relationship that we have, the trust that NASA has in us, and the partnership that we have. And we train really good astronauts. If you look at all of the astronauts, Hadfield, Garneau, Roberta Bondar, Davis Saint-Jacques, David Williams, like the list, all of our astronauts are top notch and have made great contributions to space exploration. Jeremy Hansen is going to do the exact same thing, and that partnership just keeps growing.
And he's a super engaging individual. And as I mentioned, he will be on Radio Noon later today. So you're going to want to check that out as well. So what are the goals for this mission, and how do you measure what is a success or not?
So the Artemis 2 mission, Hansen will tell you, the goal of this mission is to pass the baton to the next mission. So they're the first people to fly this spacecraft, the Orion spacecraft. So they're putting it up into low Earth orbit here first. That'll be the first part of the mission. They'll spend a day orbiting the Earth, checking out the things like life support systems, communications, processes, Capcom. They'll actually take over control of the flight. So they'll do manual flight of the spacecraft. They'll turn it around and move it around a little bit, which they were unable to do in Artemis 1 because there were no people on Artemis 1. Then they'll turn on the rocket and they'll fly off towards the moon, and they'll do more process checking, more engineering checking. The goal here is to do everything that the Orion capsule is designed to do, check all of the pieces of it, check all of the processes of it, check all the equipment, and get it back home safely on the ground. And if you do that, then you're ready to go for Artemis 3, and would be consider that a successful mission.
They haven't even lifted off with Artemis 2, and NASA already saying, listen, we're going to make changes to Artemis 3. So what kind of tweaks have they made to that future mission?
Yeah, this took me a little bit by surprise. Although now in retrospect, I don't think it was as surprising as I thought as I thought. But what the Artemis program is, this whole suite of missions from Artemis 1 out to 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. And the next mission, Artemis 3, after this one, was meant to be on the ground of the moon. So they were going to send humans to the ground next, after Artemis 2. So that was exciting. It's very soon. But in the last 30 days, NASA has changed the program a little bit. They've taken Artemis 3 and made it a low Earth orbit mission, brought it closer to home, and probably for the better, because they need to do things like test out a couple of docking maneuvers, which they haven't been able to test yet, as well as the spacesuits. They haven't tested spacesuits yet, so doing that closer to home makes sense. But one of the bigger pieces of this, which is surprising, is they've paused the Lunar Gateway space station. It was a space station that was going to go around the moon that Canada was heavily involved in. So that's on pause right now with future unknown. So there's been some shakeup, but Canada's still heavily involved. We have Hansen going, and our partnership is strong. And it speaks to wanting to go all in on the surface, getting people on the ground, and looking towards things like how far we can get, like Mars after that.
What will you be watching with this mission?
Well, so it's different than the ISS. When we launch astronauts to the ISS, they have like direct internet connection. They can tweet, they can post on Instagram. You can be fully involved with what they're doing. In deep space, beyond low Earth orbit, communications are throttled, so we don't get to hear from the astronauts as much. But they will be doing a couple of downlinks, some presentations. They'll set up a camera and they'll be talking to us. So I'm going to watch for those. And NASA has this really great interactive app and software on their website where you can actually follow the mission and see what's happening based on the data dumps that come. So I'll be watching for all of that. I'm basically going to be glued to my computer.
And how does the weather look? Because I know it was scrubbed once before due to weather. How does it look?
Yeah, the weather is, last I checked, it's looking okay. Cautiously, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic that launch will happen in this window, either that, hopefully the first one, which is April 1st, starting around 6:30 Eastern time. So cautiously optimistic, things are looking pretty good.
Fingers crossed, it's going to be super exciting for all of us to watch. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Jesse Rogerson is an astrophysicist and associate professor at York University, co-author of the book Daydreaming in the Solar System, Surfing Saturn's Ring, Golfing to the Moon, and Other Adventures in Space Exploration. We reached him in Bradford, Ontario. We'll continue to watch the final countdown to the Artemis 2 mission. More conversation about that later in the show. Your CBC local news starts now.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It is -4 right now and colder than seasonal for the final day of March. We start the day with some light snow, risk of freezing drizzle, then clearing, a windy high today of -2. Manitoba's health minister has no plans to make measles vaccines mandatory. Uzoma Asaguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. They say that will help make the shots more accessible to people who are vaccine hesitant. Asaguera is not contemplating a mandatory order.
The impacts of mandating on some folks has contributed to people really resisting vaccines altogether. That if you want people to buy into vaccines, they need the information, they need the education, and they need to feel like they can have the choice to do so.
Asaguera says public health officials will be at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair in Brandon, trying to encourage better measles vaccine uptake. Workers will also be going to communities where measles is surging to talk about the importance of vaccinations. Manitoba's top doctor says immunization against meningitis is important in order to reduce case numbers. Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Brent Rusin, says last year Manitoba reported 24 confirmed infections. The normal average is 6. In 2024, Manitoba changed rules so children could get vaccinated against 4 strains of meningitis at the age of 12 months. But the type B strain was left out, and that is the variant responsible for a meningitis outbreak in the UK, which has left 2 people dead. Rusin says Manitoba has a vaccine for it if required.
If somebody does have that serogroup B positive, then we'll provide that to their contacts and things. So right now, it's not part of our routine schedule because it's not. We're not seeing that as part of our epidemiology.
There have been 2 meningitis cases in Manitoba so far this year. None are connected to the B variant. Manitoba Hydro is cutting back on remote work for many employees this fall and instead requiring more time in the office. Starting October 6th, hybrid employees will be expected in the office 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. Monday will remain an optional work-from-home day. Hydro says the change will improve collaboration, but some employees are not happy. Daniel Schrader is vice president of QP Local 998.
It's the work-life balance is the key thing here. Coworkers of mine or other people have voiced that they've been able to get a lot more of a work-life balance.
The union says it is now looking at whether it can push Hydro to reconsider before the change takes effect. Premier Rob Canoe says the NDP's gas tax holiday was the most important thing a Manitoba government ever did. The opposition says Canoe is out of touch, while a political scientist says the premier probably got caught up in the moment. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
At the federal NDP convention on Sunday, a former MLA asked Premier Rob Canoe about his government's decision to forego hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in 2024 when it instituted a one-year gas tax holiday. Here's how Canoe described that move.
The most important thing that a provincial government ever did in the history of Manitoba.
Canoe's office says the premier was serious. The PC opposition says he's out of touch. Deputy Leader Jeff Breeza says giving women the right to vote and building the Red River floodway were more important. U of M political scientist Chris Adams says Canoe may not have said the gas tax holiday was the most important move if he thought about it further.
I think Rob Canoe was just speaking in the moment. If he sat back and discerned about it, it'd be hard to believe that he would see this as more important than all these other things.
Adams says he thinks the expansion of Manitoba's borders in 1912 was the most eventful government decision. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Reports of a massive explosion in the Iranian city of Isfahan. U.S. President Donald Trump posting a video on his Truth Social platform last night showing a large ball of fire. The Wall Street Journal reports the U.S. dropped a 900-kilogram bunker buster on a large ammunition depot. U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth will hold a press briefing this morning at the Pentagon. You can hear the latest on this story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7.
All right.
An Indigenous group in Steinbach wants to work with the city on putting its community safety and well-being plan into action. Mino O'Daywin formed in Steinbach last year. It aims to bridge cultural gaps and help the 17 organizations involved in creating the plan. Mayor Earl Funk says he welcomes more voices at the table.
We need to work together to make sure that we are always including all people in everything. And that's very important because we are a blended community.
Steinbach's plan has 7 priorities, including community belonging and inclusion. Funk says the next step is creating a committee of service groups to make sure the plan's goals are met. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, now you're finished, right? Sorry about that, Heather.
No worries.
So excited to get going. It has been such an exciting morning so far, and Heather will, of course, keep us up to date throughout the rest of the morning as well as we talk everything from spacecraft to going back to the job a little bit more to what maybe you're doing for spring break. So keep the calls coming as well to our commuter line if you are seeing any difficulties out there. And we know that, Abby, we have seen some snow overnight, and that is going to cause some hiccups for sure.
I tell you for sure, my friend, and the radar and gadgets up in space, if it points down right now at Manitoba, it's going to be seen more like
it's the snow globe.
Snow-covered area. That's what you will be seeing. Though this system is going to be tapering off this morning. We don't have any warnings across the regions, though the flurries are going to be tapering off maybe close to your lunch break. We're still below seasonal for this time of the year. Expect some clear skies tonight, though the wind chill, you will feel it in the south and even more as you go up north. Forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, light snow ending this afternoon. Then we'll see some clear conditions. We may spot some freezing drizzle in the city today, so that may also be a concern if you are on the highway, especially along those Canastin axes where freezing drizzle is always a problem. So take it easy there. Current temperatures hovering between -4 and -6, depending on where you are in the city. Cloudy conditions at this time. We're expecting a high of -2 today, and it then drops by. It then goes to -14 later tonight. But for tomorrow, we get to 0. So that's some kind of positive number.
Dangle that carrot
dangle
in front.
on the horizon. For the southern region, -3s to -7s. That's what we're getting. In the Pembina Valley region, all the way towards modern towards Port La Prairie, we're seeing -4s there. You warm up to -1 later. In the Westman region, Brandon and nearby communities tracking -7, light snow falling in that part of the province. -2 is your high for today. In the Parkland region, Dauphin all the way towards Russell and Roblin, we're around -8 there. Light snow falling there, high around -2. And in the Interlake region, Gimli, good morning. You are at -6 at this time. We also have light snow ending this afternoon, and then you get to a high of -2. Now tracking it into the northern part of the province, where we see temperatures between -13 around the Power Flin Flon, and then towards Churchill we're seeing -27s there. The Power Flin Flon, both areas mainly clear at this time. We're having -13s and -14s depending on where you are, also warming up to -2. While around Thompson, Ninlick and Gillam, we're looking at cloudy conditions between -10 and -20, and highs would be around -6 in that region. For Tudula Lake, you're currently around -19 with light snow falling. Your high gets to -8, while in Churchill and the York region, frigid -27 at this time. High would be around -14, though the wind chill is a concern. It's still close to -47, so there's a risk of frostbites in play. In summary, this snowy start is going to be followed by some cold clearing later tonight across most of the regions. But for the city right now, we're expecting some clear skies in the afternoon, and we get to a high of -2. It's not the plus 4 we're expecting.
But with our sunny personalities, it's going to feel all right.
Yeah, but right now it's -4.
Okay. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop is here, our show director, and also monitoring traffic. I know my drive in this morning, I was using the windshield washer fluid a lot, so that's something to keep in mind.
Too.
Yeah.
Yep. And just like in the city, a light dusting of snow on the streets. I didn't find it too slippery in my drive, but I'm curious about other areas of the city. Right now, I'm getting calls about highways outside of Winnipeg. So we got a call from Trucker George about icy conditions from from Starbuck to Oak Bluff. And I just got a call from Tom. He was traveling on Highway 16 and recommended, if people can, to stay home and wait until the plows come out, because on Highway 16 from Russell to Binsgarth, there was snow-covered conditions with ice underneath, causing some pretty slippery conditions. And he said that you can't see the markings because of that. So again, he recommended to stay home and wait for the plows if possible, and if not, drive to conditions. You can check Manitoba 511 for highway conditions, or give me a call and let me know what you're seeing out there, and I'll pass that message along to your fellow commuters. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
6:40 now, and let's take you to Halifax, where we find Phil Demont with our business report. Good morning.
Yeah, Julie, I was listening to Abby's forecast. Last week, I was in Tokyo where it was 12 and the cherry blossoms were out. I came back to 0. I love the Canadian winters in maybe December, January, maybe by April. I'm kind of tired of them.
Yeah, I think we all sort of are, and we're waiting to schedule the appointments to take the winter tires off, but not just yet. We also might have to schedule an appointment to go to the bank in order to get a loan so we can buy gas. So what's happening with oil prices?
Yeah, they're the highest since 2022, but here's where I'm going with this. We were told, depending upon the length of the war in Iran and the U.S., the inflationary effects will be temporary. They might be becoming more permanent quicker than you think. Economists estimate that it takes about 3 to 6 months for high fuel costs to translate into higher prices on the store shelves. Well, that would be June, when the more permanent effects would begin. We're not seeing any end to the conflict in sight. And right now, American gasoline price is $4 US a gallon. That has the highest level since August 2022. Means soaring crude prices already entering the bloodstream of the overall economy. In Canada, diesel prices up 50% for the last 3 months. As a result, some carriers are hitting shippers with a 50% to 80% fuel surcharge. And it's not just fuel costs. The price of urea, the fertilizer for farms, up 30%. Price of plastics up 1/3 since February. Oil is a major ingredient when you make plastics. Aluminum, the spot prices for that metal up 60% since the shooting started. Iran has targeted smelters in Bahrain and the UAE. Bank of Montreal estimates that for the second quarter, inflation in the U.S. will be 4.5%. In Canada, almost 5%. First quarter in Canada was about 2.5%. So you're talking basically a big jump in inflation for the second quarter. If this thing keeps going on longer, which it does look like it's going to be, that estimate will be an underestimate.
Well, more Canadian business groups want to get more of our oil and gas to international markets. So to do that, they want more easing of Canada's rules regarding these projects. So what's the latest there?
Yeah, 2 bits here. Perrin Beatty, former federal cabinet minister, and Fen Olsler-Hampson. He's a renowned international politics expert. They argue Canada needs more infrastructure built to get oil and gas going. Nothing new there. What's interesting is who they think could fund the projects. Instead of relying on domestic sources of cash, groups usually leery of Canada's murky bureaucracy go to Asia, Europe for the money. Countries in both continents rely heavily on crude going through the Straits of Hormuz. They might be interested in funding projects in Canada that would guarantee them energy supplies in the time of a crisis. Basically, the Asian European governments would have a different criteria for a pipeline or an LNG terminal in this country than just profitability, and that would help. Business Council of Alberta, they say it takes too long for big projects to get going. The best number I could find was about 3.5 years for shovels in the ground. That council wants things sped up. Their suggestions: dump clean electricity regulations, end the ban on tankers traveling on the coast of BC, and drop the requirement to track plastics from manufacture to the end of life. To be honest, I'm not too sure what the last one has to do with project approval, but it's a regulation. This seems a little more like a political starting point than a realistic list, because some of those are going to be no-goes. Still, though, what it tells me is with both groups talking, it indicates there is momentum to axe some of the regulations that right now face Canadian companies and get more things built in Canada.
Some really great cheese made here in Manitoba, but you've got a cheesy story from France. Camembert is facing an existential crisis.
Yeah, it turns out the cheese is too popular. Camembert, the other stinky cheese besides blue. But what we're talking about is the traditional Camembert from raw milk. In certain parts of France it's made. Makes up about 10% of the 360 million wheels of that cheese that the France produces annually. But it's a bit like saying sparkling wine is the same as champagne. Camembert, traditional Camembert, part of the French identity. The problem is more countries like China developing a taste for that cheese led to industrial manufacturers moving away from traditional production methods. The problem, scientists say, is the main fungus for making Camembert is an increasingly short supply because the mold's genetic makeup means not enough, sexual activity among the fungi. So similar to many countries, Camembert is facing a fertility crisis. But before you race off to your local cheesemonger, you can still get Camembert, just not the traditional type you might be used to. So much like the Jell-O pudding pop that doesn't exist anymore, traditional Camembert might be a distant memory in a few years.
All right. Maybe some wine and some crackers later on today. Thanks for doing this.
Wine's always good.
Phil DeMond joining us with Business News. 14 minutes before 7 o'clock. I'm Julie Buckingham. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 and 990 AM. Marcy Marcusa will join us to let us know what she's going to be up to for the next few days in Brandon. First, Manitoba Hydro employees are saying they're being pushed too far too fast. The Crown Corporation asking their hybrid employees to work 4 days in office instead of the current 3, with the changes set to take effect this October. The CBC's Cameron McLean spoke to Daniel Schroeder, who says workers are not happy and that this move could impact retention. The first vice president of QP Local 988 represents Manitoba Hydro employees.
People aren't happy about the changes taking place. That's not everybody. Some are gung-ho for it, but the majority, from what I've seen, there's a lot of displeasure, and even fellow co-workers are not happy with the change.
What response is the union making to this?
What I've gathered, we are going to be going back to the corporation, trying to unify with the other unions that are also employees that are affected by this change, that aren't happy with the change, and seeing if there's a way that we can move forward with trying to get this taken away or giving us back that Wednesday. Now, the change is effective October 6th. We've got time before the date hits, but I believe we are going to be moving forward to try to see if there's anything that can be done about allowing that hybrid model to stay in place.
What consequences could this have for, hiring, retention? Is this anything like that the union is worried about?
It can definitely, it very well could affect employee retention. A lot of employees that were hired post-COVID kind of walked into this hybrid model of, a couple of days at home, rest in the office. And that's also been something that would be an attraction to people wanting to come to Hydro. So this could very well impact that part of it as well. We don't know what the long-term effect is going to be yet, but it just feels like we're going back to pre-COVID with Manitoba Hydro wanting us to be in the office more full-time here. It could very well have an impact on employee retention and attraction for sure. It's the work-life balance. Coworkers of mine or other people have voiced that they've been able to get a lot more of a work-life balance there. They seem happier, more productive. Still been open for collaboration. We've got teams. We've got so many tools at our fingertips, and with other, let's say private sector or what have you, allowing that hybrid model, only in a couple of days a week, and some are even, you got to come in 1 day a week. It is definitely something that people look forward to and it definitely helps that work-life balance. That's the biggest thing that I've noticed from the comments that were made, and there's also additional costs associated with now having to go downtown that extra day a week, because you're now having to get full bus passes versus, just pay as you go. You're now having to get maybe monthly parking because that cost associated with day-to-day parking is going to be too much. It's not only the work-life balance, but a financial commitment as well.
Was there any explanation from Hydro as to why they're doing this?
I don't know what was released to the public from Manitoba Hydro so far. it wasn't very clear as to the why, other than getting the idea more towards the goal of collaboration. But it just doesn't seem like there's enough there to justify wanting to go back to basically the 1 day every 2 weeks to work from home.
That's Daniel Schroeder, first VP of QP 988, speaking to the CBC's Cameron McLean. In an email to CBC, a spokesperson for Manitoba Hydro says, quote, starting October 6th, employees on a hybrid work schedule will be in the office 4 days a week instead of 3. Wednesday becomes an in-office day. Monday will remain an optional work-from-home day. This change is being made for better in-person collaboration and communication. We understand it will be an adjustment for employees who have been working remotely, and that's why we're not implementing this change until the fall and maintaining Mondays as an optional work-from-home day. End quote. More on the story on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. It is now 10 minutes before 7 o'clock, and Ryan Tumblety is joining us now from the Toronto Star, located in Ottawa. The House of Commons on a break until mid-April, but before MPs packed up and left last week, several pieces of legislation made some progress. So, Ryan, good morning. Thank you for doing this.
Good morning.
What was some of the legislation that got pushed forward and became law?
Yeah, so 2 bills made it all the way to the Governor General's desk and are now law. The first is C-15. That's the budget implementation bill. It contains everything that was part of the budget presentation last fall. All of the tax changes, all of the little regulatory reviews and things like that, they are now law. So that was the first part. But the government also took that bill and crammed a bunch of other things in it, which is not unusual for budget bills. One of the things, of course, was this high-speed rail project in Ontario and Quebec. It now will be able to expropriate land. It'll be able to move forward a lot faster. So that is one thing that was part of the bill. The other bill, though, that passed was Bill C-12. This is an immigration border asylum bill, mostly focused on the asylum system, really tightening up the rules on who can apply for asylum and when they can apply for asylum, sets some pretty clear rules in terms of you have to apply soon after entering Canada. Because certainly we saw in recent years people would come here on maybe student permits or work permits and apply for asylum when those permits, ended. So that was a concern about how the system was operating, and I think it's something the government wanted to address.
So were there some difficulties or any obstacles in getting these measures passed through the Commons?
Yeah, some. Obviously, the opposition parties are going to opposition. But I would say, it was a huge contrast to what we saw sort of during the kind of late Trudeau era, where opposition parties really dug in their heels at the time, really did everything they possibly could to prevent that government from passing legislation. Here, they certainly put up their objections, but the legislation passed in the end. So, for example, the budget bill, that was a confidence measure. The opposition parties really had no choice but to let it pass or go to the electorate. And the asylum claim bill, certainly the opposition parties put up a lot of concerns. They put up a lot of calls for changes to the bill, specific measures they wanted to see differently. But in the end, they allowed that bill to pass as well. So, it's just a different fighting spirit, I guess, now than it was previously.
What other legislation is still making some progress this week?
Last week we saw 2 bills get all the way through the House of Commons. One bill is a sort of telecommunications bill, kind of technical. It has to do with, telecom firms increasing their cybersecurity, making sure they're not vulnerable to attack. But the other bill that drew a lot of controversy is a bill called C9. This is the government's hate crime legislation. It creates a lot of new rules around hate crimes, new laws around that. It also sets up a new offense for someone who prevents someone from getting to a house of worship. So we've seen sort of large protests, sometimes around synagogues and things like that. This bill, I think, is aimed at trying to address those concerns. The bill ran into some controversy, though, because of how the government got it passed. there wasn't overwhelming opposition support for this bill. And the government made a deal with the Bloc Québécois to get this passed to remove an exemption that already existed in hate crime legislation. That exemption says that you can't be charged with a hate crime if you are reading from a religious text. So the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, something like that. There was an exemption in the law for that. The Bloc wanted to see that gone. The Liberals agreed to that, but there was certainly a lot of concern among Conservatives about what that will mean in practice. And you saw them really push back on this exemption, accusing the government of essentially criminalizing reading the Bible. I don't think it goes that far, but certainly, you're going to see the Conservatives continue to push back on that.
So still some hurdles for these pieces of legislation.
Yeah, I think they'll still face challenges in the Senate. And then, this is a bill that, this hate crime bill, touches on a lot of, sort of fundamental charter rights about freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And I think there are going to be some clashes there. I think it'll be difficult maybe for police to decide when and how to use it. And then I think a lot of these cases, when the law does get used, will probably end up, in higher courts, in court challenges, maybe even all the way to the Supreme Court one day.
Yesterday, day one on the job as leader for the NDP for Avi Lewis. What did we hear from him?
Yeah, so he over the weekend in Winnipeg, won that NDP leadership. Yesterday, I think, was really a message about knitting the party back together. He talked about reaching out to his leadership rivals, bringing them back into the tent, talked about how great they had been, talked about past NDP leaders. And then, we're really seeing some pushback from provincial NDP leaders, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan. We heard them, really come out right out of the gate after Mr. Lewis was elected on Sunday and distance themselves from him. The leader of the Saskatchewan NDP, Carla Beck, she said she won't meet with Lewis until he drops some of his provisions around fossil fuels and some of his policies there. So certainly, there is some pushback. And I think that is a fence that he's going to have to mend, or at least try, because, the provincial NDPs, like in Manitoba, much more popular than he is federally right now. And I think that's something that, he might want to draw on their strengths over time.
Lots still to watch. Thanks for doing this morning.
All right, thank you.
Ryan Tumulty, political reporter with the Toronto Star, reaching him in Ottawa. Licensed practical nurse is bringing awareness to the barriers of becoming a registered nurse. We'll hear what some LPNs say they face when they want to upgrade becoming an RN.
It's hard to justify when you already have the education and hands-on experience. We should be building on our education, not repeating it.
That conversation is still to come. And as we get set to deal with the morning commute, perhaps it's going to be a little bit lighter as a result of it being spring break. And we are also dealing with some light snowfall in the area as well. So that is something to keep in mind. Abby and May are both watching those situations for you as well. And let's check in with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba stepping up its fight against measles as cases soar to almost 400 since the start of the year. Starting today, Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. They say public health officials are also getting more aggressive in reaching people with information about measles vaccines. And Manitoba's chief public health officer says he is paying close attention to a meningitis outbreak in the UK, which has left 2 people dead. Dr. Brent Rusin says the spike in cases there is a reminder of the seriousness of this disease. And he says Manitoba saw 24 meningitis infections reported last year. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks.
We are anticipating those periods of light snow ending later this afternoon. As Abby's been telling us, there is a risk of freezing drizzle this morning as well. So that is something to keep in mind if you are doing some commuting both inside the city, and we're also hearing a bit of a rural-urban split, a little bit more difficult out on the highways as well. Right now in downtown Winnipeg, minus 4 degrees. Stay with us. World Report is up next.
On The Current.
Hi,
I'm Mary Delahunty, Princess Warrior.
Mary Walsh is a comedy icon. She's made Canadians laugh, also helped us understand our country. But she says it's taken her many years to understand herself and be truly happy. We'll talk to the great Mary Walsh and finding her own version of success coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Angie Seth. Nurse practitioners are a key part of Canada's public health care systems. They're able to treat patients, make referrals, and prescribe medication similar to a doctor. But some nurse practitioners working in private clinics are unable to bill the province for their services. Instead, those medical bills are going to patients. It's a loophole that the federal government hopes to close. The CBC's Tashana Reid has the details.
I went like a couple of years and not being able to get a family physician.
If Yvette Jarvis needed to see a doctor, it meant waiting for hours at the local ER in St. John's. Until 5 years ago, when she opted to pay for medical care from a nurse practitioner. It's cost her $2,500 for her and her family since then.
And they gave me the exact same care that I would normally get from a family physician. So we shouldn't have to pay the $75 and it should be covered.
Ottawa says no Canadian should be billed for necessary medical care that would be covered if provided by a physician. A year ago, the federal health minister issued a letter notifying provincial health authorities that as of April 1st, 2026, they must cover these services.
Since 2019, I have some patients who could not afford to pay me, and I knew that, so I never charged them.
Trent McDonald owns the clinic in Newfoundland that Yvette Jarvis goes to. His province is offering salary contracts with a 30% top-up for overhead costs.
I'm going to sign up for 800 patients, and in return, I have to work that many hours.
But not everyone is ready. Ontario has no policy in place. Valerie Gurdisa is the CEO of the Canadian Nurses Association.
By not innovating, by not modernizing, we are going to actually put our publicly funded health system at risk.
The federal government has given provinces 1 full year to comply. After that, Ottawa will be able to claw back future healthcare dollars from provinces that fail to do so. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
The UN Security Council is holding an emergency session this morning to discuss the deaths of 3 UN peacekeepers in southern Lebanon. It comes as Israel says 4 of its soldiers have been killed in clashes with Hezbollah in the region. As the number of deaths in Lebanon, both military and civilian, climb, there's no sign of the broader conflict ending soon. Crystal Gamansing has more.
Iran was the great bully of the Middle East and the world.
In an interview with Newsmax, an American right-leaning news company, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said attacks on Iran in conjunction with the U.S. are beyond the halfway point.
So it's definitely beyond the halfway point. But I don't want to put a schedule on it. But beyond halfway in terms of missions.
Fighting the Iranian regime for Israel also means fighting Iran's proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon, a fight that's claimed the lives of 4 Israeli soldiers in recent days and 3 peacekeepers from the interim force in Lebanon known as UNIFIL. Jean-Pierre Lacroix is the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations.
We strongly condemn these unacceptable incidents.
It's not the first time UNIFIL members or posts have been attacked since the war began. The 3 killed in a 24-hour span were all from Indonesia. Its defense ministry issued a statement demanding the safety of UNIFIL peacekeepers be the top priority and urged all parties of the conflict to respect international and humanitarian law. Israel Defense Forces said the incidents are being thoroughly reviewed to clarify the circumstances, saying that the area is a combat zone and it should not be assumed that Israel is responsible for the deaths. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Meantime, several Gulf states are on alert overnight. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait were all the targets of drone strikes. Most were shot down. Saudi Arabia is reporting damages to homes, but no injuries. Kuwaiti officials say one of their oil tankers was struck off the coast of Dubai. They say it was an Iranian drone. Officials in Dubai were able to put out the fire and say no one was injured in the attack. No oil has spilled, despite the tanker being fully loaded. Well, the federal government is accused of giving in to pressure from the airline industry. Critics say backroom pressure is leading the Canadian Transportation Agency to back away from the fee forcing airlines to pay for passenger complaints. Internal documents obtained by CBC's Go Public team reveal intense lobbying to reduce and delay that fee. Here's more from Erica Johnson.
3 years ago, Parliament ordered the Canadian Transportation Agency to implement a fee for airlines to help cover the cost of passenger complaints for things like denied boarding, cancelled flights. Government records Go Public obtained under the Access to Information Act show Transport Canada and then Minister of Transportation Anita Anand encouraging the CTA to back down from its proposed $790 fee. In an email from WestJet, the airline urges Minister Anand to indicate her disapproval of the fee. Days later, she writes the CTA, echoing WestJet's concerns, even using similar language. Gabor Lukács heads up the advocacy group Air Passenger Rights.
The minister is acting as the mouthpiece for the industry.
Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch says he's not surprised by the lobbying.
The system is all rigged in favor of protecting big business interests.
The CTA then said it was considering lowering the fee to $450. Not low enough, said Anand, who pushed for a maximum of $250 for larger carriers. Minister Anand did not reply to questions. Transport Canada said it didn't intend to fetter the CTA's independence. WestJet said its goal was improving affordability for Canadians. In 2023, Ottawa earmarked almost $76 million in taxpayer dollars for the CTA to clear the backlog, now almost 100,000 complaints. That funding expires today. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Australia is considering suing some social media giants. The country passed a law banning children under 16 from several platforms last December. But a new report from the independent internet regulator shows 5 of those platforms may not be doing enough to keep kids away. Annika Wells is Australia's communications minister.
What this update shows is unacceptable. All of the platforms who are covered by our social media minimum age laws said that they would respect our laws. And if these companies want to do business in Australia, they must obey Australian laws.
Wells says those 5 platforms are Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube. The regulator says it will investigate the allegations of non-compliance further before any legal action happens. Wells adds Australia has seen progress. As of early March, she says 5 million social media accounts have been deactivated or removed. Canada, meantime, is considering a similar ban on underage social media accounts. Jewelry giant Pandora says it is opening a distribution centre in Ontario. The Danish company says the move will reduce its exposure to U.S. tariffs. The jewelry maker, known for its charm bracelets, says its products in Thailand, makes its products in Thailand, but it has been hit hard by U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on that country. Now, the new warehouse will be in Mississauga, so jewelry ordered in Canada will no longer have to pass through U.S. customs. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne heads to China today to forge new investment partnerships. He's following up Prime Minister Mark Carney's January visit. Among the deals, Canada's plan to import thousands of Chinese electric vehicles. China is a world leader in EV manufacturing, and the CBC's Lisa Singh, who is in Shanghai, has this look at what's driving that success.
Hundreds of robots weld together different models of custom-ordered EVs on the factory floor of Zeekr, a Chinese luxury electric vehicle brand. Known as a dark factory because the level of automation is so high, the machines can largely work without lights. Automated manufacturing has helped reduce costs significantly, but also ensures quality, says the plant's general manager, Xu Naiping. China is leading the globe in EV manufacturing. It makes more than 70% of the world's electric cars, a result of a heavy push in research bolstered by sizable government subsidies. In downtown Shanghai, Cao Xingyue drives into a parking lot and backs into what looks like a car wash. The floor opens up, and robots swap out his depleted battery for a new one. In 3 minutes, he's on his way to work.
It's better than charging my battery because it saves more time for me.
There are more than 3,000 of these battery swapping stations across China, an emerging competitor to the traditional charging market. Wang Kunpeng is vice president of China's biggest charging company, Teld.
For
EVs to develop, there must be charging infrastructure first, he says. This kind of mindset would be welcomed by some Canadians now that Canada is letting in 49,000 Chinese EVs. Lisa Xing, CBC News, Shanghai.
And now that's the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Angie Seth. This is CBC News.
Good morning to you, Winnipeg and Manitoba. I'm Julie Buckingham. This is Information Radio on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM, of course, on the app and on YouTube as well. Tuesday morning of spring break. Outside our downtown studio, though, doesn't feel super spring-like. As I look at a fresh dusting of snow, it is minus 5 degrees. Anticipate perhaps a bit of a slower commute, especially if you are doing highway driving today. And again, we'll continue to watch this weather system that has rolled through. Abby has your full forecast. May McKillop is watching your commute. Also on the show, we'll tell you how you have an opportunity to still get in on a book contest to win all 5 signed copies of some very, very special books. And a licensed practical nurse is bringing awareness to the barriers of becoming an RN. That story is still to come. Let's check in with our news center as well, where we'll find Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a Manitoba teacher has been stripped of his teaching certificate after admitting to meeting up with a high school student and giving them alcohol and cannabis. David Duke was a teacher in the Frontier School Division. A report from Manitoba's Commissioner of Teacher Professional Conduct says Duke used social media to communicate with an underage high school student in September 2025. Frontier School Division Tyson McGilvery says Duke was not teaching at the time of the incident. Manitoba's health minister has no plans to make measles vaccines mandatory, but starting today, Uzoma Eseguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, let's head over to Abby, who's been watching the weather.
Yeah, look outside. We got snow-covered street this morning. Late season systems just beginning to taper off. We will still see this dusty snow cover the streets till the afternoon period, and then some clear conditions. Winnipeg right now -5. There's a risk of freezing drizzle in the mix. We warm up to -2 before the cold drops to about -14 again later tonight. Up north, we're seeing temperatures between -13 and -29.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
All right, May McKillop is here, our show director, and watching the commute as well.
Hearing a lot about the highway conditions this morning. I got a call about mostly highways southwestern out of Winnipeg, and hearing about pretty snow-covered conditions, but what's really concerning is the ice underneath that people aren't realizing is there. One caller said that that seeing the lines on the road was a little bit difficult and recommended people stay home until the plows come out if possible. But you can check Manitoba 511 for highway conditions and give me a call about anything getting in the way of your commute. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Every year during the month of March, the same memories return to haunt Linda Gerritsen. The cold, the sky, even the dates on the calendar. She says all triggers that bring her back to a weekend in 1982 when she and a friend were flying home to Manitoba from a church retreat in rural Saskatchewan. They never made it. Somewhere over Lake Winnipegosis, their small plane crashed into the snow-covered frozen lake. And Linda Gerritsen wrote about that ordeal and the harrowing weeks that followed as a first person for our CBC Manitoba website. She joins me now from Riverton. Hello. Thanks for doing this.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be able to share my story.
Linda, take us back to March 3rd, 1982. You're in a small plane and realize, or did you realize that it was in trouble?
Oh, yeah, I realized. I grew up, my dad was a bush pilot, and I grew up flying, and I saw the artificial horizon spinning. And when I saw it spinning, I yelled twice to James to watch his instruments, and he pulled back and we crashed nose and left side. And yeah, then we were out about 6 hours, and then he actually woke me up and helped me to get in the back seat. And then from there, we got ready for a long night.
So take us through that first night after the crash. You were both, I'm sure, trying to stay warm. What happened to him?
Well, we actually, like James, he put a tarp on the window, and he got a sleeping bag to cover us. But the only door in the plane was on the passenger side. And when I got in the back seat, he had me go the opposite direction. And then when he came in to the back seat, he was between me and the door. And, physiologically, guys don't handle cold as well as women because we're better physically equipped. And over the evening, like I remember him asking me for my gauntlets, and I felt his hands and how icy they were. We had spent time praying because we'd just come from a youth retreat. And the theme that at the retreat was the race of life, asking everybody where you're headed in this race, and spiritually. And James, he loved the Lord. He was an amazing young man. And yet, a number of hours after we crashed, hypothermia set in. I kept covering his head, and he'd uncover his head, and I'd check his pulse, and he had been talking and singing like we were in church or youth group. And then around about 4:30 in the morning, there was no more pulse. And what I did then was I turned to my left, so I never looked at him after the crash, because I did not want a picture of James passed away in my head. And I know I have a very vivid imagination, and I just didn't want that. And I wanted to remember him the way he was. And so that's why I made that choice.
It's difficult, I'm sure, but what were you feeling at that point?
After he died, and I had checked his pulse, I had a very big sigh. I don't know how to explain it, except I felt like I'd lost the biggest fight of my life, because, I kept covering his head. I thought I was doing the right thing, trying to keep him warm. And, but, that cold, it was minus 21 degrees Celsius that night. And he was between me and the door, and he took the brunt of the cold and really protected me. And it was hard to know that he was beside me, not there anymore, and yeah, it's really hard to explain.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring in another voice to the conversation. Frank Brent was a young pilot at the time, based out of Thompson, where he learned that his friend, James, as you've heard about, was in a plane crash. Frank joins us now from Sioux Lookout, Ontario. Hi, Frank.
Hi. Thanks for letting me join this conversation with Linda.
Well, take us back as well. What was your reaction when you learned of this crash?
Well, I was at home, I believe it was a Wednesday, and received a call from our church, actually, saying that the aircraft had gone down, and there was a request for people to be praying for the folks that were in this aircraft that was missing. I checked around on the connections that I have in the industry to find out what was happening, and found out that it was James's aircraft, which I actually used to own at one time. Any case, found out that James was missing with Linda. Of course, being close to the family or knowing the family, and that struck home. And so I contacted the family, and we were immediately got involved in trying to organize something to help with the search and rescue. And there was a paramedic that was willing to come along with us, along with another family member and a friend of the family that all wanted to jump on board and get out on the search. And I mean, this was in the evening, and I contacted well, first of all, I contacted a couple of people that I knew had airplanes that I might be able to borrow, because I didn't have an airplane. And a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Sisson agreed to borrow me his aircraft, but he told me that, Frank, it's buried in a snowbank and it hasn't run all winter, so you're going to have to do some work to get that thing ready. And my background is both a pilot and a mechanic, aircraft maintenance engineer. So we were out early in the morning before the sun was up to dig the aircraft out, and it was literally behind a big snowbank that we had to dig it out and get it out. And in the meantime, I'd also contacted the search and rescue people. And at that time, the search and rescue was just run by the military, and they didn't have the Civil Aviation Search and Rescue Association formed yet. And so the military conducted the searches, and they told us to hold off because their aircraft had been flying late into the evening, and so their crew wasn't going to be fresh till I think about noon. And so they wanted me to coordinate with the crew where we would search. And I thought, I am going to have burnt off a full tank, and I'll have 4 hours of searching done by the time their crew is fresh and ready to go. I'll have burnt off a full tank of gas, and so I'll be able to get some good search time in. And so we decided to just go ahead and with our own plan. And interestingly, Linda talks about her faith, and there was a group of us that got together as we were planning where to search. There was a group that we got together, we prayed, we just asked for direction, and I circled 2 places en route where I thought that, that it was going, like, I think over here. And we went pretty much directly there, did a little bit of searching on the way, but pretty much directly to the 2 spots that I had circled. And sure enough, that's where we found the airplane. And I will never forget seeing the wreckage, and it was just pieces strewn across the lake. And I went, well, there's no survivors here. No survivors here.
The story does not end here, however. More from Gerritsen and Berendt in our part 2 conversation after 8 o'clock. We want you to win the 5 nominated books for Canada Reads. All you have to do is what these people did.
My name is Laura McComb. I live in Grand Marais, Manitoba, and I have a contribution to your contest. In 2008, Andrew Davidson, a Manitoba author born in Pinawa, published via Random House a novel called The Gargoyle. I'll read to you from a bit. Accidents ambush the unsuspecting, often violently, just like love. There was a brief moment of weightlessness, a balancing point between air and earth, dirt and heaven. How strange, I thought. How life, the moment between sleeping and falling, when everything is beautifully surreal and nothing is corporal. How like floating towards completion, but as often happens in that time between existing in the world and fading into dreams, this moment, over the edge, ended with a ruthless jerk back to awareness. Thanks for listening. Again, I'm Laura McComb in Grand Marais.
Hi there, my name is Bridget Weeb, and I'm calling you to read an excerpt of my favorite book from childhood onwards. The book is Jane of Lantern Hill by L.M. Montgomery. So here we go. In a little wood glen full of goldenrod, where Martin Robbins' old hay barn stood, they met the lion face to face. He was standing right before them among the goldenrod, in the shadows of the spruces. For one moment they all stood frozen in their tracks. Then, with a simultaneous yell of terror, Jane yelled with the best of them, they dropped their pails, bolted through the goldenrod and into the barn. The lion ambled after them. More yells. No time to close the ramshackle old door. They flew up a wobbly ladder which collapsed and fell as young John scrambled to safety beside the others on the crossbeams, too much out of breath to yell again. The lion came to the door, stood there a minute in the sunshine, slowly switching his tail back and forth. And the story goes on, but that's all I'm sending today. Thank you.
If you would like to win a full set of autographed books from this year's Canada Reads shortlist, call our listener line 204-788-3205, 788-3205, or email win@cbc.ca with a line or two from your favorite book. We'll take entries until 10 o'clock this morning and announce the winner April 1st. All right, let's check in with Paul McGowan, and we'll start with the pebbled ice curling. Canada rebounding in Utah after a pretty disappointing weekend.
Yeah, back-to-back losses on Saturday and Sunday. And yes, it was early in the World Men's Curling Championship, but entering yesterday, Canada was sitting outside of the playoffs. Matt Dunstone's rink, though, put in two solid efforts yesterday. They beat Poland early on, beat Japan later in the day, and Dunstone says the team has sorted through some of their issues.
You know, I think we just need to stay a little bit more patient with our in-shot communication. Started with me. You know, I wasn't processing necessarily what the sweepers were saying to me and just making judgment calls without processing the numbers I was hearing. And it was just a little bit out of sync. And that was our conversation yesterday. It has the feel of the correct version of this team is trending in the right direction here.
The correct version of Team Canada is about to be tested today. Not so much by China, who they play this morning, but definitely by 7-0 Sweden, who Canada plays in the evening session. Sweden playing well right now and also maybe playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulders after their performance at Milano Cortina. All
right, let's go to baseball. Kind of an interesting incident on the mound and then a hit, and ultimately the Blue Jays lost more than just the game last night.
Yeah, well, I mean, boy, did they lose the game, 14-5 to the Rockies. But as you said, they also lose Cody Ponce, who left the game in the third inning, was chasing down a ground ball and sort of tumbled and is experiencing what the team is calling right knee discomfort. Here's manager John Schneider.
It sucks, his first outing, and kind of his journey, what he's been through. So hopefully it's the best news possible. Going back like a month and a half ago, you talk about our starting depth and you can never have enough. You never know what you're going to face. And there's always going to be challenges that you think you're ready for and then something else pops up. So if it's not great news, we'll have to see who's going to be ready when. But right now, just kind of focused on Cody and hoping that he's all right.
Yeah, Ponce's story is one of the better stories in baseball this year. In 2021, at 27 years old, he was not close to being an everyday player, and he could have called it a career, but he goes to Japan and to Korea and reinvents himself. And last night was supposed to be his triumphant return to the big leagues. Instead, his season, at least for now, is on hold.
And so is the parade, at least for now.
At least for now.
Okay. So let's end on soccer. The men's national team plays Tunisia tonight.
Game 2 for Canada in this international window after playing Iceland to a draw on Saturday. A bit of a stiffer test tonight in Tunisia. But also today, Canada will get clarity on who they play at this summer's World Cup. It'll be either Italy or Bosnia. They are playing in UEFA World Cup qualifying. And Coach Jesse Marsh was asked about the potential of Italy getting through given how much Italian heritage there is in parts of Canada.
For the World Cup, we need to have a red out. We need every stadium to be packed with red. Like, if it's Italy, man, then we should be ripping all those blue jerseys and burning them, okay? You got it, you Italians? And we should be wearing red, right? It should be a red out, even if we play Italy.
Fighting words from Jesse Marsh. And Julie, I grew up around a bunch of Italian soccer fans, and I don't know if they will change their soccer allegiances so easily come June. Either way, it would be a heck of a way to open Canada's group stage this summer if it is Canada and Italy, and we'll find out today who that is.
I grew up and spent a lot of time in Thunder Bay, also very passionate group of Italians that live there. Could we maybe have maybe pizza or pasta while we watch the game? Could we maybe?
I think you can split the difference there. And I think if Canada can win that first game, if it is Italy, then you might see some switching of sides. But I don't know, that first game, I think there's going to be a strong contingent of Italian fans.
It will always be entertaining. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Julie.
Sports Report with Paul McGowan. Still to come next hour, a licensed practical nurse talks about the barriers upgrading to a registered nurse. That story and much more after your CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. Last day of March, and we're colder than seasonal, a lot colder than seasonal. Normal high this time of year is 5 today. We're hoping for a -2. Windy again today, and the sky clears this afternoon. A Manitoba teacher has been stripped of his teaching certificate. David Duke admitted to meeting up with a high school student and giving them alcohol and cannabis. Manitoba's Commissioner of Teacher Professional Conduct released its report on the case earlier this month. It says Duke used social media to communicate with an underage high school student in Frontier School Division in September 2025. He admitted meeting with the student and providing them with alcohol and cannabis. Superintendent Tyson McGillivray says Duke was not teaching at the time.
Mr. Duke was already retired from Frontier School Division. I know within the agreement it said he was on leave, but he had effectively retired on June 30th, 2025.
McGillivray declined to comment further on the case itself, but encourages parents and caregivers to talk to their children and be aware of what's happening in their lives. Manitoba is stepping up its fight against the measles as cases soar to almost 400 since the start of the year. Starting today, Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. They say that will help make the shots more accessible to people who are vaccine hesitant. Asseguera says public health officials are also getting more aggressive in reaching people.
To go to communities, to have these conversations with families, sit in their living rooms and have these conversations about why this is important, to go out to community like the Brandon Fair and make sure that people can see in real time that we have vaccines that are accessible and available to you.
Asseguera is not contemplating a mandatory order, saying information and education about vaccines is more effective. A union for some Manitoba Hydro workers says a planned change to remote work isn't going over well. The Crown Corporation says employees on hybrid schedules will move from 3 in-office days to 4 starting in October. They're dropping Wednesday as a work-from-home option. Hydro says it's about improving communication, but QP Local 998 Vice President Daniel Schrader says many workers are unhappy.
We are going to be going back to the corporation, trying to unify with the other unions that are also that have employees that are affected by this change, that aren't happy with the change, and seeing if there's a way that we can move forward with trying to get this taken away or giving us back that Wednesday.
The union says the shift could mean higher commuting costs for employees and could affect retention. Manitoba's Chief Public Officer of Health says he is paying close attention to a meningitis outbreak in the UK, which has left 2 people dead. Dr. Brent Rusin says the spike in cases there is a reminder of the seriousness of the disease.
It can have severe neurologic complications for those that survive. So it is certainly an illness that is to be taken very seriously and acted upon very quickly.
Rusin says the routine meningococcal immunization is important to stave off the spread of the illness that causes meningitis. Premier Wab Kinew says the NDP's gas tax holiday was the most important thing a Manitoba government ever did. The opposition says Kinew is out of touch, while a political scientist says the premier probably got caught up in the moment. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
At the federal NDP convention on Sunday, a former MLA asked Premier Wab Kinew about his government's decision to forego hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in 2024 when it instituted a one-year gas tax holiday. Here's how Kinew described that move.
The most important thing that a provincial government ever did in the history of Manitoba.
Kinew's office says the Premier was serious. The PC opposition says he's out of touch. Deputy Leader Jeff Breeza says giving women the right to vote and building the Red River floodway were more important. U of M political scientist Chris Adams says Kinew may not have said the gas tax holiday was the most important move if he thought about it further.
I think Wab Kinew was just speaking in the moment. If he sat back and discerned about it, it'd be hard to believe that he would see this as more important than all these other things.
Adams says he thinks the expansion of Manitoba's borders in 1912 was the most eventful government decision. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
An Indigenous group in Steinbach hopes it can help implement that city's community safety and well-being plan after an 11-year-old First Nations boy was attacked at school. 17 local organizations helped put the plan together. Bambi Berthollet at Mino Odewin wants to see their group involved in how this plan rolls out.
We bring that Indigenous perspective to the table, and we can go alongside a person to some of these meetings and make sure that their needs aren't being dismissed or suppressed.
Steinbach's community safety and well-being plan focuses on issues around housing, mental health, addiction, and access to services. Mayor Earl Funk says a new committee is being formed to make sure the plan's 23 goals are met. You can read more about all these stories and stay in step with the news as it breaks through the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells at the News Center this morning. It has been not a bad day so far in terms of our forecast. However, that snow, Abby, has definitely brought some trickier driving conditions.
Yeah, trickier driving conditions. And as you get into the, the deeper parts of the morning rush, you need to take it easy. If you're along Osborne, Transcona, Regents, you just have to take it easy. Slippery spots, you will notice it on the road. This flurries, though, it's going to stay with us for most of the morning, and then we'll see it taper off as we get towards the afternoon period. Still below seasonal for this time of the year across the regions. Forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region at this time, bringing this light snow ending around the afternoon period, though we're going to deal with a risk of freezing drizzle in between. Current temperatures around -5 at the Forks, and even similar conditions we're seeing at the airport this morning. Expect a windy day. High would be close to -2 before we drop to -14 later tonight. Across the southern regions, we're seeing -3s to -7s as this light snow tapers off. In the Pembina Valley region, Modern Winkler, Altona is down to the U.S. border -5. Warming up to -1. You're dealing with light snow at this time. For the Westman region, Brandon and nearby communities, mostly cloudy at this time. High around -8, warming to -2. For the Parkland region, Dauphin, good morning. It is -8 there also. Light snow falling. You warm up to -2. The Interlake region, Gimli and nearby communities around -6 with light snow. Highs close to -2. While up north, the power flame from both areas hovering between -13s and -15s at this time. Warming up to -2. Thompson, Linley, Gillam, we're looking at cloudy conditions there between -10 and -20, depending on where you are, and you struggle to get to -6. While for Tuduli Lake, we're seeing -19 there with light snow, high of -8, and Churchill frigid at -29, the wind chill close to -37. Winnipeg, we are at -5 for now.
All right. Abby Adiemi is monitoring your weather and, of course, pushing all the right buttons. May McKillop is our show director and checking traffic for us as well.
Hearing about a lot of highway conditions this morning, particularly Highway 16 and Highway number 1 west out of Winnipeg. We're hearing about snow-covered conditions and some ice underneath those snowy conditions as well. So you're going to want to take caution if you're driving the highways and check Manitoba 511 for highway conditions. As well, I have a traffic note about the Disraeli overpass here in Winnipeg. There's a collision blocking the southbound curb lane. So you're going to want to keep left to pass and expect southbound delays. Avoid the area if you can. That's on the Disraeli overpass. Anything else going on in the commute? Give me a call and I'll pass that message along. The number to call, 204-788-3093.
Fly me to the moon, let me play
me among the stars and let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars.
Well, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen and 3 Americans could get to blast off in less than 36 hours on humanity's first trip to the moon in more than half a century. Yeah. By the way, in this day in 1972, the year that they went to the moon, The Godfather was the top movie. The #1 song was Horse with No Name. All right, they've already joined the towering Artemis 2 rocket poised to blast off Wednesday from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida and send them around the moon, the closest they've come to launching, as fuel leaks and other issues caused some months of delay. So what do they hope to learn? How is Canada contributing? Those are just some of the things that we're going to chat about with our next guest. Philip Ferguson is the director of StarLab and associate professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Manitoba. He joins me live in studio. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning.
See you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this mission?
99. This is incredible. I mean, so many of us have been waiting a lifetime for this to happen again, right? I mean, we've done a lot of great space science in Earth orbit, and we've seen robots on Mars, and we've even sent some robots to the moon, but we have never sent humans this far away since 1972. This is a really big deal, and it's a big deal for Canada also, because we have a Canadian astronaut on board. It's so exciting.
Okay, so why is this so critical at this point?
So this is critical because we all are thinking a lot about what's next for human exploration of space. So we all have great sights set on Mars, but we need to learn to crawl before we can walk. And so we need to get to the moon first to try this out, to understand how to do things on a different planet. Now, the moon's not really a different planet, but it's close enough. And we can try out life support systems. We can try out exploration systems. We can learn more about what kind of rocks are on the moon and how we can make fuel and get water and survive on a different planet. So this is an important stepping stone to the next phase of human exploration.
So 1972, I'm not going to tell any tales out of school, but I was in diapers, So why has it been so long since NASA said, well, we'll go back?
Well, I think, in the early days of the space race, we were really just laser focused on beating the Russians to the moon. And I think we did that. And then we thought, you know what, there's a lot of important things that we can do in low Earth orbit to support life here on Earth, like remote sensing and communications and basic space science. And so I think we had a lot to learn about just how to live in space. And the International Space Station has done that. Of course, Canada has played a huge role on the International Space Station, putting all the space robots there. We've had several astronauts live and work on the International Space Station. So this is now kind of our next best step. We just heard this big announcement from NASA last week that they're going to invest $20 billion on a lunar base now, which is huge, and Canada will play a big robotics role there. So it's important that we have our astronauts out there starting this week.
Do you think there's a role for what you do at the University of Manitoba and your students in some of that?
100%. So we're so excited at StarLab to be working with Magellan Aerospace to build Canada's first ever satellite to orbit the moon. This is a satellite called MAPPER, and it's part of the mineral mission that Magellan is leading. And Magellan and the Canadian Space Agency have put their trust in the University of Manitoba and our students at StarLab to build this first ever satellite. It's going to be the size of a toaster. Actually, later today, I'm flying to Montreal to have a meeting with the Canadian Space Agency and do our first design review of this spacecraft, and my students will be with me there too. And I mean, when I think back to me as a student many years ago, and the experiences that I had, they pale in comparison to what our students are going through today. Literally making spacecraft to go to the moon. I mean, it can't be more exciting than that, right?
Any idea when this fancy toaster could be headed there?
Yeah, our lunar toaster will be launching in about 2028 as part of another NASA mission. It'll communicate with a NASA lander, and Magellan Aerospace is building a little, what we call a lawn dart, a little impactor probe that's going to bury itself into the lunar dust and get science back. I mean, it's I sometimes I have to pinch myself, right? So, I mean, we're going to be watching Jeremy launch tomorrow. Jeremy's going to come back and inform us all about what he saw around the moon, and we're going to use that information in collaboration with Indigenous students in Winnipeg and around Manitoba to learn how to navigate. So using the same kind of navigation skills that Indigenous people have been using for centuries on Lake Winnipeg in the middle of the winter, we're going to learn from that. And we're going to learn how to navigate around the moon with information from Jeremy too.
And that's what's so cool about this is as we're learning about the not only the Canadian aspect of this with Jeremy Hansen, and Jeremy, by the way, will join Radio Noon today, but also the patch that he's wearing, designed by an Indigenous artist from Saging First Nation, and your work at Star Lab and your students. So there's lots of touch points right from Manitoba heading ultimately to space. So that is, it's fascinating. Is there any other Canadian content involved with this mission?
The mission tomorrow?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, aside from Jeremy being on the mission, which is huge. I mean, Jeremy is not only the first Canadian to go around the moon, he's the first person that's not American to go around the moon too. So I mean that holds a huge spot. I heard an interview with Jeremy just yesterday saying that he feels like he has the weight of the entire world on his shoulders because he's representing the first international person to the moon. So I mean it's huge. I always like to remind people that the first thing that ever touched the surface of the moon on the Apollo 11 landing was Canadian. Canada built the landing legs for the Apollo 11 lander. So Canada has a really important role to play. We're important in space communications, space remote sensing, and now of course lunar robotics.
So what will Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen's role be in this mission?
Yeah, so he, like the other three astronauts, are going to be really doing a shakedown of this space capsule. This is the first time that this capsule has ever had people in it. So they have to test out the life support systems, the propulsion systems. They have to make sure that they can point the spacecraft where it needs to point. They're going to be testing out their navigation systems. And it's all on it's a risky mission, no question. They're going to the other side of the moon, but it's not as risky as the next mission, which will go into orbit around the moon. This is really just going to be a little slingshot maneuver to kind of whip around the back of the moon. But depending on the day that they launch, they could be the furthest ever humans to ever be away from Earth, which is stunning to think about. When they're going to look back at Earth, it's going to see just a little blue marble. It's going to look incredible.
You know, you think if you took 10 days vacation, it'd be like, okay, well, I went to Europe, or maybe you went as far as Asia. It's like they're going to take 10 days and go slingshot around the moon.
Exactly. And you know, what I'm looking forward to the science, I'm looking forward to the technology, but I'm also looking forward to the perspectives that they're going to see, right? I mean, today, there's a lot going on in the world right now, here in Canada and of course overseas, and our service people. They're going to see all of that in one little snapshot. And when you hear about astronauts come back, that's the impactful thing that they see. They see our entire globe in one little fragile ball, and it gives them a whole new perspective on life. And I'm looking forward to hearing that from Jeremy and how his perspectives on space and geopolitical tensions, how everything changes when you see the world from that light.
When you look at how missions have evolved, you know, from watching it maybe on black and white TV, and now there's pretty much something getting launched all the time. At our house, there's often a feed going, not necessarily being watched by me, but by others, watching things either blow up, or which is sometimes considered a success as they're trying to test things, to now, live tweeting and Instagram. What can we expect from this mission? And does that inspire the next gen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, access to space has never been easier than it is today. SpaceX rockets are launching almost every other day, which is allowing us to put more stuff into space, like from the University of Manitoba. But all that said, there is nothing routine about launching to the moon, which is going to happen tomorrow. I mean, this is still a really big deal. And yeah, the inspiration that we get, but like the next generation, like you said, I mean, you were in diapers. I mean, I was about the same, right?
Yep.
And last time we went to the moon, and here we are today, right? Talking about the next astronauts to go to the moon. So I keep thinking, who's in diapers right now that's going to be seeing this, and who's excited, and what are they going to do? Are they going to be the first ones to walk on Mars? Are they going to be Canadian leaders that are exploring the solar system for us? Who knows, right? But it's moments like this, and it's the excitement that we're all feeling as Canada and around the world to see these people go to the moon. I'm excited. I think the future is bright for us in this industry.
Are you optimistic that April Fools will not be playing a joke on us, and that this will launch tomorrow?
I am optimistic.
Okay.
We've ruled out a lot of other technical problems, but I'll echo the commander, Reed Wiseman, and say this is a test flight, right? And they're going to go when the vehicle says it's ready to go. And so it may not be tomorrow. I hope it's tomorrow. We think we've got everything licked. The helium leaks, the hydrogen leaks, but these are tricky gases to keep in one spot. So let's keep our fingers crossed and our toes crossed, and rabbit's feet might help today too.
The best of luck to you and to your students as you fly to Montreal to meet with the Canadian Space Agency. Will you come back and let us know about Does it have a name, your toaster?
Yeah, the toaster's name is Mapper. So
Okay,
it's Mapper. It's going to be mapping out the surface of the moon. We're working with the University of Winnipeg here too to build a sensor that's going to be looking at moon rocks. And so we'll let you know how it goes.
Okay.
We're really excited about it.
Congratulations on that. Thanks for popping in studio today. We're both excited. What time should the launch be, hopefully?
I think it's around 6:45.
Our time?
Yeah.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night,
Yeah,
exactly.
all right. Philip Ferguson is the director of Star Lab and associate professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Manitoba.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars, and let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you.
Fly me to the moon, and he's going to the moon. Jeremy Hansen will join Radio Noon today. It is a conversation with the Canadian astronaut you will not want to miss. 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, I'm Julie Buckingham, in for Marcy Marcusa. A Manitoba licensed practical nurse wants to bring awareness to the barriers to becoming a registered nurse. Jenna Olson has been a registered LPN for 2 years and has started an online petition calling on the province to follow through on its commitment to create a faster, more flexible LPN to RN bridge at a program through Assiniboine College. The petition says, quote, currently LPNs who want to become RNs are often required to repeat a significant amount of education they have already completed, despite already having extensive nursing training and clinical experience, end quote. In this year's provincial budget, it promises to help create more pathways for LPNs to become registered nurses, starting with $500,000 to boost the existing pathway program at RRC Polytech this fall. And it's working with the Assiniboine Community College in Brandon to establish an LPN to RN pathway for rural and northern communities. But is it enough? LPN Jenna Olson joins us now over Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning, Julie. How are you?
Doing well. Tell us a little bit about the difference between what you do as an LPN and what an RN does.
Well, in Manitoba, the scope between LPNs and RNs isn't too far off. I mean, essentially, in the hospital setting, a lot of the time people say you can't really tell who's who. Like IVs, IMs, injections, catheters, all of it falls kind of under the same scope. I was told in school the main difference is that RNs can go into management positions and LPNs can't. That's what I was told. So it's really not too far off. I mean, back in the day, I think LPNs had a much smaller scope than they do now. Now over the past, 2 decades, they started adding more and more to the scope, broadening it, because back in the day, we couldn't even do injections, like in the 90s, I believe. But now that they've added more and more and more, the roles have grown to become extremely close and overlapped together. So that's kind of a big reason behind the aim of a bridge that more closely aligns with LPN's current amount of knowledge and experience, bridging to that RN gap that there is.
Why did you want to start the petition?
So, to be honest, I didn't want to start a petition at all. Over the past year, I've reached out to MLAs, the ministers, the premier himself, just to get some clarity on this. I didn't get any direct responses. And MLA actually did send a letter on my behalf to the minister, just, inquiring about this, but there was no follow-up or clear answer after that. So after almost a year of trying with no answers, I decided to start a petition this past March just to see if any other LPNs were feeling the same way. And, for background info here, while they were campaigning, the NDP did talk about a fast track, flexible online LPN to RN bridge. And that gave a lot of us LPNs hope that there would finally be a realistic way to upgrade while continuing to work. But over time, those promises have become harder to find clearly outlined. And even though they were a big part of what people were initially responding to. So with the petition, the response was immediate. People signed quickly. Some people even donated their own money to help increase its visibility. And it just made it clear to me that this wasn't just my frustration, it's something that a lot of nurses are dealing with. And actually, one ICU nurse commented and said this: I currently work in the ICU and there's no difference in scope of practice between an RN and an LPN. You won't know who's who unless you ask. And to think to upgrade, I have to go to practicums, etc. It's a money grab. Another nurse said, LPNs and RNs currently have no difference in scope in the practice in Manitoba. So why do we need to repeat schooling and going for practicums, etc.? Makes absolutely no sense. So I think these comments reflect what nurses are experiencing in those clinical settings where LPNs are already working at that high level, alongside RNs, and yet we're still required to repeat that training to move forward.
What specifically would you like to see the province do?
So I would say what we're asking for is, pretty straightforward: a fast, flexible LPN to RN, online bridge program that has that online learning so nurses can just keep working while they study. I think, ideally, practicum should be built into their current workplaces, similar to how apprentices in trades train on the job. So they're learning in the same environment where they're already gaining experience instead of stepping away and starting out for elsewhere. On top of that, there needs to be clear and realistic timelines so nurses know what to expect and to plan their careers with some certainty.
How are you feeling after seeing the budget promises for LPNs wanting to become RNs, spending $500,000 to boost existing programs at Red River and establishing that new pathway program for rural and northern LPNs?
So I would say, any investment in healthcare is important, but what is missing here is clarity and accountability. There is no defined structure, confirmed seat capacity, funding commitment, or firm timeline for an LPN to RN bridge, while other programs I noticed in the budget are clearly outlined with start dates and capacity. The LPN to RN bridge just remains vague and labeled as a proposed 2027 start, where nurses were originally promised a pathway to actually advance their education, but without these specifics, it's kind of hard to see how that meaningfully changes anything right now. And after Assiniboine College created the program, I think this was June 2024, we've already been waiting close to 2 years for government approval. And then the response that we get is a proposed start date of 2027. So for something that's already been developed, that timeline just feels long and uncertain, especially when there's a clear need for more nurses in the system.
Some might say, Jenna, you know what? Making it easier for an LPN to become an RN does not ultimately increase the number of nurses in Manitoba. What would be the benefit to the healthcare system if more LPNs become RNs?
So I think there's definitely a place for both here. There's absolutely a place for LPNs, and it's not necessarily about replacing that role, but LPNs are, a core part of the system. They provide a lot of hands-on direct patient care at the bedside. The goal isn't essentially to push everyone to upgrade, but it's to make sure that those who do want a fair and realistic way to do it. And essentially keeping our nurses working on the front lines instead of taking them out of school for 2 years. That's another thing I'll add. The current bridging program, it's not an actual pathway for LPNs to become RNs. It's joining a second-year RN class. You're in school full-time for 2 years, and the time it takes doesn't necessarily add up either. LPN school is about 20 months long, give or take, and RN school is usually about 30 months long, give or take. So with this pathway that we have right now, you actually end up doing over 40 months in total, which is 10 months longer than it would take to start as an RN from scratch. So not only are you leaving your job, doing full-time schooling, that's a huge financial commitment, you're joining a second year class. So those friend groups are already established, which is another thing there. And you're, leaving your job for it. And that's why a lot of people aren't upgrading. And I think a lot of LPNs don't feel necessarily appreciated, or they just feel exhausted because they're doing all of this hard work in the hospitals. And a lot of them feel like their pay doesn't, equal the responsibilities that they're taking on.
We have to leave it there, Jenna. We appreciate your time.
Sure.
She's an LPN for the last 2 years. We have to scoot because it's time for World Report.
On cue.
I'm Garvey Bailey, in for Tom Power. Canadian electronic quartet Holy F has spent 2 decades making music out of just about anything. They're celebrating 20 years together and back with a new album, Event Beat. And they'll be here to talk about their unorthodox sound and the journey behind it.
I firmly believe that technology is something to be reckoned with.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Mary Walsh is a comedy icon. She's made Canadians laugh, also helped us understand our country. But she says it's taken her many years to understand herself and be truly happy. We'll talk to the great Mary Walsh and finding her own version of success coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Angie Seth. The federal government is accused of giving into pressure from the airline industry. Critics say backroom pressure is leading the Canadian Transportation Agency to move away from the fee forcing airlines to pay for passenger complaints. Internal documents obtained by CBC's Go Public team reveal intense lobbying to reduce and delay that fee. Here's more from Erica Johnson.
3 years ago, Parliament ordered the Canadian Transportation Agency to implement a fee for airlines to help cover the cost of passenger complaints for things like denied boarding, cancelled flights. Government records Go Public obtained under the Access to Information Act show Transport Canada and then Minister of Transportation Anita Anand encouraging the CTA to back down from its proposed $790 fee. In an email from WestJet, the airline urges Minister Anand to indicate her disapproval of the fee. Days later, she writes the CTA, echoing WestJet's concerns, even using similar language. Gabor Lukács heads up the advocacy group Air Passenger Rights.
The minister is acting as the mouthpiece for the industry.
Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch says he's not surprised by the lobbying.
The system is all rigged in favor of protecting big business interests.
The CTA then said it was considering lowering the fee to $450. Not low enough, said Anand, who pushed for a maximum of $250 for larger carriers. Minister Anand did not reply to questions. Transport Canada said it didn't intend to fetter the CTA's independence. WestJet said its goal was improving affordability for Canadians. In 2023, Ottawa earmarked almost $76 million in taxpayer dollars for the CTA to clear the backlog, now almost 100,000 complaints. That funding expires today. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is warning other nations that the Strait of Hormuz is not just a U.S. problem.
I think other countries should pay attention when the president speaks. He's proven that when he speaks, he means something. And he's pointing out, might want to start learning how to fight for yourself. It's something some of us have been saying for quite some time. You can't just have flags, you have to have formations. You can't just have a few ships, you have enough to affect change.
Hegseth referring to an early morning social media post by U.S. President Donald Trump. In it, Trump told other nations, including the UK, to either buy oil from the United States or go get it from the Strait of Hormuz themselves. Despite another day of tough language from both the White House and the Pentagon, both maintain that talks are ongoing and progressing, something officials in Iran deny. Meantime, several Gulf states say they were targeted in overnight strikes. The United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia all reporting drone attacks. And authorities in Dubai say a Kuwaiti crude oil tanker was hit off its shores by an Iranian drone. Megan Williams has the latest.
Just after midnight here in Dubai, a Kuwaiti oil tanker fully loaded with crude, anchored just off the city's port, was hit by what Kuwait Petroleum is calling a direct Iranian drone strike. The Al Salmi was bound for China, carrying oil from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Authorities say there's damage to the hull, but all 24 crew are safe. And so far, no oil has spilled. It's been far from quiet here. 6 loud booms resonated in pairs this morning, minutes apart, sounding as if they were moving closer to the city center. Authorities confirmed those sounds were interceptions of incoming missiles and drones. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait also reported interceptions overnight, with some damage in Saudi Arabia. As Washington tries to navigate a way out, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Al Jazeera deciphering Iran is difficult, with its new supreme leader Ayatollah Mashtaba Khamenei in hiding.
No one has seen him, no one has heard from him. It's very opaque right now.
Still, Rubio confirmed there are talks underway with Iran through intermediaries, even if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. A significant shift. 2 Chinese container ships successfully sailed through the strait on a second attempt, a rare sign of movement in waters largely paralyzed for weeks. Oil prices remain above $115 a barrel. Megan Williams, CBC News, Dubai.
To news here at home, a group of researchers at Dalhousie University is sounding the alarm. They say the Halifax Regional Municipality is not factoring in the possibility of a mass evacuation in its city's planning. As the CBC's Ben Durand reports, it's causing major concern given the city's growth over the past decade.
I haven't seen much bold or actionable items yet.
Hassan Habib is a professor and transportation expert at Dalhousie University. He says on an average workday, commuters flood into the Halifax Peninsula, pushing the population to roughly 100,000 people. That's a massive concentration for a municipality of over 500,000 residents. He warns that it adds a greater risk in the event of a disaster.
We have seen that, of course, like with the time and with the different kinds of travel activity, the evacuation time has increased to 23 hours.
Almost an entire day for everyone to get out safely. He says one of the major factors is that the peninsula only has 5 exits. In 2017, his estimate was 15 hours. Habib says a decade of growth without much consideration by the city of a potential mass evacuation is to blame. He says hurricanes, floods, and wildfires are among the biggest threats in the area. Halifax Regional Council voted unanimously in 2024 to update the municipality's evacuation plan. Imad Aziz is the municipality's Director of Emergency Management.
It's a multi-year plan, but the strat plan itself will be presented in its final form later in the year.
Professor Habib is happy about the work that's happening, but says there's much more to be done before he'll be confident that everyone will get out safely if disaster strikes. Ben Dornan, CBC News, Halifax.
Statistics Canada has just released its report on gross domestic product, or GDP, for January. It shows the economy edged up 0.1%. CBC's senior business correspondent, Peter Armstrong, has more.
The number itself may not be something to write home about, but the fact that the Canadian economy was able to eke out some growth in January definitely is a nice surprise. The growth is largely driven by mining and quarrying and oil and gas extraction. Not surprisingly, the wholesale trade sector, the manufacturing sectors, they both took big hits in January. As a whole, manufacturing was down 1.4%, but the specifics here tell the bigger story. Motor vehicle manufacturing was down 23.5%, the biggest pullback we've seen since 2021. Now, part of that was retooling in winter for factories, but it's been a very rough year for that sector and that industry. Statistics Canada's preliminary estimate for February shows the economy likely expanded further. StatCan says it's expecting 0.2% growth, so a decent start to the year. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne heads to China today to forge new investment partnerships. He's following up on Prime Minister Mark Carney's January visit. And among the deals is Canada's plan to import thousands of Chinese electric vehicles. China's a world leader in EV manufacturing. And the CBC's Lisa Sheng is in Shanghai with this look at what's driving that success.
Hundreds of robots weld together different models of custom-ordered EVs on the factory floor of Zeekr, a Chinese luxury electric vehicle brand. known as a dark factory because the level of automation is so high. The machines can largely work without lights. Automated manufacturing has helped reduce costs significantly, but also ensures quality, says the plant's general manager, Xu Naiping. China is leading the globe in EV manufacturing. It makes more than 70% of the world's electric cars, a result of a heavy push in research bolstered by sizable government subsidies. In downtown Shanghai, Cao Xingyue drives into a parking lot and backs into what looks like a car wash. The floor opens up, and robots swap out his depleted battery for a new one. In 3 minutes, he's on his way to work.
It's better than charging my battery because it saves more time for me.
There are more than 3,000 of these battery swapping stations across China, an emerging competitor to the traditional charging market. Wang Kunpeng is vice president of China's biggest charging company, Teld. For EVs to develop, there must be charging infrastructure first, he says. This kind of mindset would be welcomed by some Canadians now that Canada is letting in 49,000 Chinese EVs. Lisa Xing, CBC News, Shanghai.
And that's the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're enjoying World Report, the World Report podcast, well, please follow us and tell a friend. It helps spread the word. I'm Angie Seth. This is CBC News.
Good morning to you. I'm Julie Buckingham, in for Marcy Marcusa. More about where she is in just a moment. This is Information Radio on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Tuesday morning, -5 in downtown Winnipeg. Abby will have your full forecast in just a moment. Later this half hour, as I mentioned, Marcy Marcusa isn't here today. That's because she's getting set to do a couple of shows for Manitoba's second largest city. We'll check in with her at about 8:25 to find out what she has in store. Coming up, we'll speak to a child exploitation advocate about a recent teacher misconduct incident in Manitoba. That conversation is just ahead. Time to check in with our news center and Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's health minister has no plans to make measles vaccines mandatory, but starting today, Uzoma Asaguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. And a union for some hydro workers says a planned change to remote work isn't going over very well. Starting on October 6th, hybrid employees at Manitoba Hydro will be expected to be in the office 4 days a week instead of the current 3. Hydro says it's about improving communication, but the union says many workers are unhappy. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Appreciated. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Abby Adiemi is at the controls and has been monitoring your forecast. Cold, snow, kind of everything.
Yeah, the snow-covered conditions we're having will definitely be tapering off as we get into the afternoon. Sunshine in Brandon at this time. Up north, we're still seeing those dangerous wind chills. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at light snow falling in the city. This should end around the afternoon period, and then we'll see some clear skies. Look out for windy conditions coming from the northwest as it reaches 50 kilometers per hour later. Currently, we are around -5. We stay around -5 for most of the day, but we warm up to -2 later. Seasonal for this time of the year is +4, so still a bit chilly outside.
Yeah, definitely. And it has been kind of a tricky commute as well, as we have dealt with conditions both inside the city and outside the city. May McKillop has been monitoring the traffic line. And if you've got something to share, you can certainly call us 204-788-3093. Has been a bit of a story of an urban-rural split. So if you, again, have anything to let us know about on the commute, you can certainly do that. A Manitoba teacher stripped of his teaching certifications. He was a teacher at Frontier School Division, but in September of last year, 2025, he used social media to meet up with a high school student. He admitted to giving that student alcohol and cannabis. This is all according to the Manitoba Public Registry, posted by Manitoba's Commissioner of Teacher Professional Conduct. Chief Superintendent Tyson McGilvery said the teacher was, quote, fully retired from the Frontier School Division at the time of the incident. Anne-Marie Robinson is a child advocate, co-founded the advocacy group Stop Educator Child Exploitation. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Would you consider this case as qualifying as child exploitation?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it's very important that teachers who have an enormous amount of influence and control over students, that they really respect the boundaries that are set out for them by their employers, and not cross those boundaries. And clearly, talking personally on social media, meeting a child for personal circumstances and providing them with substances like cannabis and alcohol is really an example of crossing those boundaries.
Some might argue that it's not a case of abuse. What worries you about this type of behavior between the student and teacher?
Well, I mean, there's a number of things. I mean, in one instance, I'm assuming I don't know all the facts of this case, but the child was likely underage. And also, when a teacher has that much control over a student, because by virtue of the fact that they are a teacher, then it's very important that you not cross the boundary and put a child in a vulnerable situation. And we all know if you're under the influence of alcohol or cannabis, then your guard is down, and it's just not a circumstance that a teacher should ever be in with a student.
Let's talk more about those boundaries and how everybody should know what those boundaries are, whether they're a teacher or a student.
Yes, well, I think increasingly school boards across the country have done a good job, and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection in Winnipeg has excellent training available to all teachers, where those boundaries are clearly set. I mean, it's a professional relationship. It's one that, is set in the classroom. School boards now have clear guidelines around communicating. So you need to respect those and do it through the channels that are set about by the school boards and not cross those boundaries. It can be very confusing to students when those boundaries are crossed. Children, especially in high school, are very vulnerable. And so they need the adults around them to really be very clear about what those boundaries are. And it sets a model for them with other adults in their life, and it's an important part of education.
We certainly hear about teachers accused of abuse. In this case, it's considered professional misconduct. So do we know how common these types of cases are in Canada?
Yes, I don't know. And I mean, this case was about giving the student substances that were illegal in the case of the child. But, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection did a study on sexual abuse of students, which is something different. And they released the study. It was done between the years of 2017 and 2021. And they found that at least 548 kids in Canada had been sexually exploited by an educator or someone in the school system. What's important about that study, though, is they know it's just the tip of the iceberg, as they said in their report, because the real truth is that most school boards across the country are not publishing reliable data about how many children are experiencing abuse in the school system. And so the 548 children who had experienced sexual abuse at the hands of a school personnel or an educator is just the tip of the iceberg. And so that is something that Canadians should be alarmed about. The schools must do a much better job at protecting children. Now, the recent steps that Manitoba has taken to put this commissioner in place and to have a much more independent process and to have a registry is a really important step towards preventing abuse.
Less than a minute remaining. Can you tell us what needs to change to make kids more comfortable to report teacher misconduct?
Yes, I think they need training in the schools. They need to definitely get the messages that this is not their fault. If a teacher crosses a boundary, they are basically incapable of consenting in a situation of such unbalanced power because the teacher has so much influence over them. So the schools really need to create an environment and get that message out to kids that if teachers do cross these boundaries, that they can and should report, and they need to create a safe space. Our organization advocates for independent tribunals in every provinces or bodies where students can report outside of the school, because often, I know I was abused by my high school teacher in the 70s, and you understand, even as a student in a school, that the teachers all know each other. They might be friends with this person or that person or the principal in charge. And so you want a place where you can report that is more objective and separate and independent from the school. And so I think it's incumbent upon schools to create safe spaces for students to report abuse or the parents.
An important conversation. We appreciate your time today. Anne-Marie Robinson, co-founder of the advocacy group Stop Educator Child Exploitation.
Yes, thanks so much for discussing this important subject.
Now for part 2 of our conversation with Linda Gerritsen, who survived a harrowing plane crash in the middle of a March snowstorm 44 years ago, the crash killing the pilot, her close friend, James. Linda lost an eye and both legs, and today she recalls events of the crash. But we begin part 2 of the conversation with her rescuer, Frank Barrent, who recalls the moment he looked from the search plane and saw the crash site below. Based on the wreckage, he did not expect anyone had survived the crash until.
And then this arm came out of the side of the window when we flew overhead, and there was just elation in the cockpit that there is somebody alive, and we circled around and landed, and then came running up to the airplane, and Linda was there in a incredible amount of pain, and James, we found out, was gone already. And Linda, because she was, had been so long, then she was no longer in shock anymore. And of course, with being as broken as her body was certainly living in an extreme pain. So we stripped all the seats out of the airplane, except for the pilot's seat. And I'm so thankful. By God's good grace, we had a paramedic on board who, knew what to do. And like I say, we stripped all the seats out because it was just a small airplane, and then we got Linda painfully loaded into the aircraft.
But I need to back up a teeny tiny bit. I went to sleep after James died. I knew that wasn't the right thing to do, but it was the only thing I had any energy to do. And when I woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I asked the Lord to send somebody to rescue me before noon or let me die, because I didn't want to just be sitting there, hour after hour and waiting for, who knows what. And so around 11:30, I heard the drone of a very familiar small aircraft. And because my dad was a pilot, I knew there's a plane. And I had this piece of plexiglass, tinfoil, like a space age blanket. And when I heard that plane, I stuck it out of the window and I waved. And it was an incredible moment. The first one actually to the plane was James's brother-in-law, and he asked if he was unconscious, and I said, no, he's dead. And he stepped back, and they, just like a tin can, they took the roof open, right, Frank?
Yeah, well, the airplane was so broken up that there was not any, there was, the roof was literally broken off, and all we had to do was flip it over.
Yeah.
It was very badly bashed up, so.
And they got me out and put me in the rescue plane, and Neil let me have some coffee, not very much, but I could have drank the whole thermos, it was good coffee. but I definitely needed it.
Well, the coffee was warm, and I think that was part of what Neil was worried about was, I shouldn't really be giving her anything till we get her in the hospital, but anything to get some heat into this poor girl.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's funny because I never felt cold. I never consciously felt cold. I don't have a memory of feeling cold. But I do remember when I felt James's hands that they were icy. And that's when it kind of scared me that something was wrong, really wrong with him.
What was the feeling of emotion like for you, Frank, to see her and to know that all of the effort, digging borrowing a plane, saying, I'll dig it out of a snowbank, saying, I'm not waiting for the military, even though the weather, I'm sure, was not very good for you. And to see that hand come outside of the plane.
Well, we all had goosebumps. Yeah, it was, when we spotted it, like I say, we didn't have any hope when we seen the wreckage, when we were coming up to it. It certainly didn't look good, but when that arm came out, that certainly was a moment of elation. And, and it was actually it was a beautiful day for flying when we were looking for Linda and James. So the weather wasn't an issue.
Blue sky and sunshine, I remember, and cold.
And cold, and the other it wasn't very windy. It was a beautiful day, but cold.
Yeah.
Linda, do you remember your emotions at that moment?
You mean when he came?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I was just grateful to God that it wasn't noon yet, because here the guys were, and men who prayed and flew straight to me. I mean, how is it possible? Well, we know it's possible because here I am, without Frank taking the initiative. And if he'd let, search and rescue just come and get me, well, I could have been frozen by the time they got there too. So the fact that they did what was on their heart and put in all that effort to come to find us and found us, I mean, isn't that just amazing? It's still, after 44 years, yeah, I mean, I can still feel goosebumps at just the thought of how everything worked.
Linda Gerritsen joining us from Riverton, Frank Berend from Sioux Lookout, Ontario. For more on Linda's story in her own words, visit our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I'm Suresh Das. I've spent my career writing about the local favorites that make Canada's food scene truly unique. I bit into a chili. Woo! From vibrant street food to comforting traditional dishes.
The most important ingredients in jollof rice, love.
To innovative, personal twists. Butter chicken lasagna.
Butter chicken lasagna. Yeah. That's what made it all happen.
I believe every bite tells a story. Now, I want to share those stories with you.
New series Locals Welcome with Suresh Das. Watch free on CBC Gem.
26 minutes after 8 o'clock. It is a special year for the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair in Brandon, celebrating 120 years with all the horses and competitions and exhibitions celebrating rural life. CBC's Marcy Marcusa and Corey Funk are in Brandon for the next few days for a few special shows. And Marcy is with us now. Hi, Marcy.
Hi, Julie. I don't know how I'm going to follow that incredible interview, but
remarkable.
Wow, it's remarkable. It's great to be with you from Brandon this morning.
Yeah, my stomping grounds. And it was part of our family tradition to head to the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair during spring break. And so you'll meet lots of rural Manitobans and Brandonites. What are your plans for those shows?
I have to say, and I'll talk about the fair more in a moment, which is funny because you grew up doing this, and I'm learning about that because of all the things I've done in Manitoba over the years I've lived here and had the privilege of doing the morning show, I've never been to the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair, so I'll talk about that more in a moment. But for the Brandon shows themselves, it's part of our Communities in Focus trip. So the focus is a little larger than the fair, where we're going to get into a number of different things about this city, the second largest city, of course, in Manitoba, some over 50,000 people here now, of course, and just so many things going on with post-secondary education, with business. And the Brandon show specifically, though, just because I want people to come out and join us and pitch us and share with us what they care about rural Manitoba, why they live in Brandon, why they visit Brandon, and what the rest of the province should know about Brandon. Tomorrow we're at Chez Angela, which is a great spot, of course. It's Bakery and Cafe on 10th Street, downtown Brandon. And then the next day we're at Forbidden Flavors on 18th. So both local shops. We did try to broadcast live from the fair, but we're just going to have a lot of stories from the fair for you in the shows and sounds and sights. But we will be at the cafes to open up the conversations about Brandon.
And as we talked about the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair, get the ice cream on the stick, wrapped, with the nuts on the outside. How's it all going to fit into the shows?
I saw someone eating that yesterday, Julie. So apparently that's a thing.
It is a thing.
Yeah. You know what I'm really absorbing about the fair so far as we're walking around the grounds here at the Keystone Center, which is, of course, attached to the whole complex. It's just, I know that I've done the interviews over the years and talked about, how people come together. This is the 120th. This is about agriculture. This is about the horse shows and all the animals and showing rural life. But this is really where people show their rural life. And that's really staying with me. All these families coming together that have brought their animals here, that have brought their loved ones here to sort of show why they care about their lives here in this part of Westman. And we have a lot coming up from that point of view. So the city part will be looking at Brandon, the emerging downtown, what's going on with post-secondary education, all kinds of stories. The Royal Winter Fair stuff is going to be really about those families. Corey's with a multi-generational family that competes in the ring. He was with them yesterday. He also went to the bowels of the Keystone Center to look more at just what this event, quote unquote, means. It's so much more than just an event to Brandon. But he looked at sort of what it looks like underneath there and all the people coming together. We're going to do all the fun stuff too, the ice cream on a stick, the cowboy hat, the sequin denim, I promise. And we'll hear from people at the fair here, as well as some of the young people that grew up through 4-H. Today is 4-H day at the fair, so we're not going to miss that. So
head, heart, health, and hands.
You know it. Lots coming up.
All right. Thanks, Marcy. Marcy Marcusa joining us from Brandon. And, of course, their shows for the next couple of days will be out in Brandon. Time 8:30 now. Your local news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30 it is -5. It's going to be a cold last day of March. A windy high of -2. Manitoba is stepping up its fight against the measles as cases soar to almost 400 since the start of the year. Starting today, Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera is giving pharmacists authority to vaccinate young Manitobans between the ages of 2 and 19. They say that will help make the shots more accessible to people who are vaccine hesitant. Asseguera says public health officials are also getting more aggressive in reaching people.
To go to communities, to have these conversations with families, sit in their living rooms and have these conversations about why this is important, to go out to community like the Brandon Fair and make sure that people can see in real time that we have vaccines that are accessible and available to you.
Asseguera is not contemplating a mandatory order, saying information and education about vaccines is more effective. A teacher in the Frontier School Division who gave alcohol and cannabis to a teenage student has been stripped of his teaching certificate. Manitoba's Commissioner of Teacher Professional Conduct says in September 2025, David Duke used social media to communicate with an underage student. Its report says they met at a prearranged location where he gave the student alcohol and cannabis. In the report, Duke did not dispute the allegations. Frontier School Division Chief Superintendent encourages people to have conversations with their children.
I think it's important that when students or situations like this arise, that parents talk to their children and make sure that they're aware of what's happening in their children's lives.
Tyson McGilvery says the incident in question happened after Duke retired in June 2025. Manitoba Hydro is cutting back on remote work for many employees this fall and instead requiring more time in the office. Starting October 6th, hybrid employees will be expected in the office 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. Monday will remain an optional work-from-home day. Manitoba Hydro says the change will improve collaboration but some employees are not happy. Daniel Schrader is Vice President of CUPE Local 998.
It's the work-life balance is the key thing here. Coworkers of mine or other people have voiced that they've been able to get a lot more of a work-life balance.
The union says it's now looking at whether it can push Hydro to reconsider before the change takes effect. Manitoba's chief public health officer says he is paying close attention to a meningitis outbreak in the UK, which has left 2 people dead. Dr. Brent Rusin says the spike in cases there is a reminder of the seriousness of meningitis.
It can have severe neurologic complications for those that survive. So it is certainly an illness that is to be taken very seriously and acted upon very quickly.
Rusin says routine meningococcal immunization is important to stave off the spread of the illness that causes meningitis. He says Manitoba saw 24 infections in 2025. 2 people have contracted the illness so far this year. Premier Rob Canoe says the NDP's gas tax holiday in 2024 was the most important thing a Manitoba government has ever done. Canoe made the statement Sunday during the federal NDP convention. The Premier's office says he was serious. The PC opposition calls him out of touch. Deputy Leader Jeff Bariza says giving women the right to vote in 1916 and building the Red River floodway in the 1960s were more important moves.
With the Premier saying that it was the greatest thing ever done in the history of Manitoba is an insult to every government that has been in power here in Manitoba.
University of Manitoba political scientist Chris Adams says Canoe probably got caught up in the moment. An Indigenous group in Steinbach hopes it can help implement that city's community safety and well-being plan after an 11-year-old First Nations boy was attacked at a Steinbach school. 17 organizations helped put this plan together. Bambi Berthollet at Mino Odewin wants to see their group involved in how this plan rolls out.
We bring that Indigenous perspective to the table, and we can go alongside a person to some of these meetings and make sure that their needs aren't being dismissed or suppressed.
Steinbach's community safety and well-being plan focuses on issues around housing, mental health, and addiction and access to services. Steinbach Mayor Earl Funk says the new committee is being formed to make sure the plan's 23 goals are all met. You can find the latest news as it's updated throughout the day. As it breaks, just go to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Miss Heather Wells. That smiling face, always appreciated.
Aw, thank you.
Aviation has been doing our weather all day long, and
I guess now we all know we're waking up to snowy streets and highways and sidewalks and trails all covered this morning. Late season systems really tapering off. It's going to leave behind, below seasonal temperatures. Still chilly. We get sunny breaks in between. Down south, we'll see temperatures hover near -12 and highs would get close to -8. Winnipeg, we warm up to -2 today. We're supposed to be at +4 at this time.
And one final check of traffic.
Highway 11 from Highway 214 to Lac Bonnie is closed due to a collision. Thanks for everyone who called the commuter line today.
Quick correction coming up on Radio Noon. Host Marjorie Dowhouse will have an extended interview with the Anishinaabe artist of a patch that astronaut Jeremy Hansen will be wearing on Artemis 2. Again, Henry Guimond will join Marjorie on Radio Noon. Our associate producers, Sierra Sanders, Sophia Peralta Barone, Donna Carrero, Jim Agapito in the news department, Joni Nicolo, Megan Ketchison, Heather Wells, Darren Morash, our YouTube producer, senior tech Abby Adeyemi, and director May McKillop. Nellie Gonzalez is the show producer, and Leif Larson, senior producer of audio.